Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wa kulli ibadi yaqulu allati hiya ahsan. Inna ash-shaytana yanzagu bainahum. Inna ash-shaytana kana lil-insani aduwwan mubina. And tell my servant that they should speak in a most kindly manner unto those who do not share their belief. Verily, Satan is always ready to stir up discord before men or between men. For verily, Satan is man's fool. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُعْتَدِينَ. And fight in God's cause against those who fight you, but do not transgress limits in aggression. Verily, Allah does not love transgressors. لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم. And God do not forbid you from dealing kindly and justly with them with regard to those who do not fight or oppress you because of your faith, nor drive you out of your home. Inna Allah yuhibbul muqsitin. For Allah love those who are just. Wa in janahu lis-salmi, and if your opponent or the other party inclines toward peace, fajnah laha, then you too should seek peace. وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ هُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. And put your trust in God. Amen. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa barik wa sallim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin.
Taginiit, andi ni kuntaan si atubangan no, nagtapok-tapok, alang, tapag sabot to Ginoo, sa na panagti kwanay, ikaw taag dumala di at kanami. Ikaw taag gabay, tinita kanami ng mga kakuntaan uwa. Sukunod, taginiit, tawara ka, wara kay kani kuntaan. Taginiit, isang pamasa ikuntaa na panagtigom. Ikaw, taagbagay, kalinaw, tungod kay sa na forum kutaan, ang tayo sa panakiusa sa Mindanao. Alang ta, kaubanan na Muslims sa lumad at sa Christian. Ikaw, taagruhay ka namin, nakaabot sa itiba kuntaan. Mahal naming Panginoon, nagpapasalamat po kami sa iyo ngayon that you are ready to na magkahiusa kami sa kalinaw din sa Mindanao. We are here to ngagisaligya kanimo to first ka ikaw Ginoo. Sa pamalasig wato nisalig ko ikaw tumatakatuan takakalabitan, tiyatakatuan takanabise, sa kadyatak salik pwede ikaw. Amen.
Lord God, Father of us all and merciful Lord of creation, we thank you today as we gather in your presence and through your mercy in this school dedicated to your glory. Thank you for the gift of understanding and openness to dialogue, which makes this gathering possible. Thank you for the mercies that you have shown in the past to your people, as we read from the prophet Ezekiel. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, now I will restore the fortunes of Jacob and have pity on those in the house of Israel, and I will be jealous for my holy name. They shall forget their disgrace and all the times they have broken faith with me, when they live in security on their land with no one to frighten them. Thus they will know that I, the Lord, am their God. We pray in this spirit, Lord, that today we may take another step in the process of mutual understanding. May what unites us be foremost rather than our differences. May our differences be calls for mutual justice, and may the call for justice be rooted in your mercy, just as you, O Lord, are always merciful to us. Amen.
Please remain standing for the Philippine National Anthem. Please take your seats. And to give us the welcome remarks, I would like to call the University President, Reverend Father Joel Taboro.
The Honorable Ghazali Jafar, the Vice Chairman for Political Affairs of the MILF, Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer, the Government of the Philippines Chief Peace Negotiator, the distinguished representatives of the MILF and the other Muslim Filipino communities that are present, representatives of the security forces of the country, friends from other beliefs, NGOs, and academe, good afternoon to you all. We come together today in quest of a deeper consensus on a homeland. All of us look forward to a permanent home, bathed in the light and splendor of the one God we worship. Life is a journey through life's shadows and darkness towards this home in light. Compared to that heavenly home, all our homes are passing, at times new and exciting, at other times old and venerable, repositories of our most cherished hopes, our most sacred memories, our deepest loving and creativity, our connectedness with our forefathers and their forefathers, our most defining experiences. In our earthly homes, wisdom has been passed on from generation to generation. Toil, tools, and industry have supported life. Dance, song, and festive tables have celebrated it. Warriors and weapons, passion and death have defended it. In these homes, all, beholding the grandeur of their mountains, the poetry of their rivers, the fullness of their fields, the sun which rises on the good and evil, the rains which fall on the just and unjust, the exhilarating, undeserved, gratuitous gift of it all, have bowed down profoundly in worship of the God who freely creates and blesses, gives us our homeland, and wishes us well. Earthly homes are not our heavenly home, but our earthly homes are our life, and the land on which these homes stand, our homeland. Hopefully, through the exchanges and conversations of this day, we may come to deeper consensus on a homeland. This was their homeland long before the coming of the Spaniards, holding in one hand the cross and in the other the sword. This was their homeland, even as the Spaniard had converted those whom they called Indios to Christianity and taught them the language and culture of the conqueror, called them Filipinos after the Spanish Prince Felipe, who then became king, and declared the land on which they'd built their houses and homes not their homeland, but the domain, the homeland of the Spanish crown. For those, however, who resisted the Spaniards' triune God and remained loyal to their one all-powerful Allah and their Islamic faith, colorfully nurtured in the customs and traditions of different ethno-linguistic groups. Their homeland was theirs, held by them in common, inherited from generations of forebears whose lineages reach to the Prophet himself. A homeland not allocated them by the foreign conqueror, but theirs from time immemorial, settled, tamed, fought for, and defended. This was Moro homeland, even when the Katipuneros and the national propagandists, enlightened by the Enlightenment of Europe, began finally to fight the Spaniard on their home soil for their own homeland, based on human equality, human dignity, and human freedom. Now turning the enlightened thought of their conquerors onto the conquerors themselves and demanding the recognition the Filipinos deserved. But this was a fight the Moros did not have to fight, because they had never accepted the rule of the Spaniard, and the Spaniard had never conquered them. It was their homeland, even when the American, in a deceitful betrayal, stole it from the Filipinos and stole it from the Moros, by buying it from the Spaniard who had no right to sell it at all. This is why the Moros defied the American invader. It was their homeland that they fiercely fought for, long after the Filipinos in Luzon and in the Visayas had capitulated. They fought fiercely and valiantly against bombs, cannons, and superior arms, until finally they were massacred in Buddaho and Budbagsak in Jolo, as the domesticated Filipinos looked on, pacified by the white skin of their conquerors, mesmerized by the arrogance of their manifest destiny of imperialism for the defeated people's own good, they said. And buoyed by the scornful hatred, the Americans bore the savages of Maguindanao and Sulu, who would rather die as martyrs of Allah rather than accept the rule they called satanic. For after all, the Filipinos, in American eyes, the Filipinos were not savages. They were true Filipinos because they were not Moro. They were little brown brothers because they were Christian. Conquered, the Moros still fought for their homeland, as the American conqueror and the Filipino collaborator brought wave upon wave of settlers from the north to further pacify the Moros by integrating them with the Christians. But how were they to be integrated with the Christians when the Christians rejected to be Muslims and the Moros rejected to be Christians? How were they to be integrated with the Christians when the settlers' insatiable thirst for land now fed on pieces and portions of their beloved homeland? How were they to be integrated with the Filipinos when the Filipinos did not respect the traditions and customs and religious beliefs, and the Filipinos with the conquerors implemented a foreign land registration system which eventually deprived them of greater and greater portions of their homeland? How be integrated with them when in their dealings with Filipinos from the north, they always were regarded as second-rate, second-class, outside, excluded, dealt with only when convenient, instrumentalized, patronized for the interests of the North? Alienated from the Filipinos who alienated them from their Filipino and Christian homeland. Their struggle for a homeland turned into a struggle for independence from the Filipino, whose assimilation with the culture of the conqueror had turned them into the mode of the conqueror. A Muslim independence movement morphed into an armed struggle for Muslim independence, even as that wretched Ferdinand Marcos covered up the folly of his adventurism by spilling the innocent blood of Moro soldiers, and covered up the crime of his mass murder by renouncing the claim to Sabah. That was not his to renounce. but the house of the Sultan of Sulu. Another wound from the north to the Moro homeland. Much blood was spilled. Ilagas spilled the blood of black shirts. Barracuda spilled the blood of Ilagas. The bereaved cried for revenge. Maratabat could not be ignored. Terror worsened the hatred. Hatred worsened the prejudice. Every bad experience of the ugly Christian or the ugly Muslim was now fuel for the flames of prejudice and hatred. It could have gone on and on and on. Possibly the issue of the homeland may have become more and more distant as war took its toll on all. This is why I said, we are gathered here today to find a deeper consensus on a homeland, a Bangsamoro homeland. Clearly, the struggle is legitimate. We are all grateful that the armed struggle has yielded to the struggle of the negotiating panel and the hope of negotiated agreements, protected by the goodwill of national and Muslim leaders. We know, however, that the issue of the homeland will not be settled simply by top-heavy agreements on how to share wealth or share power or normalize relations. Even the passage of a Bangsamoro law will be counterproductive unless there is an ever deeper consensus on the ground for a homeland for Filipino Muslims. A consensus that will not happen unless we all will to achieve this consensus. Towards this homeland long overdue, we must come personally closer to each other, to exchange with each other a piece of our hearts. This interpersonal bonding necessarily will be the heart of our peace. Only in this manner will we avoid the pitfalls of nitpicking on naughty legalisms and grandstanding on destructive superficialities that at core disrespect the mandate of the Constitution for a genuinely autonomous region, a homeland for Filipino Muslims. May the will to consensus recognize that Bangsamoro is a work in progress, a struggle in progress, a collective self-consciousness in struggle, that with every breakthrough in personal insight, understanding, and even conversion brings new light and new hope. This work in progress, Bangsamoro, is not only theirs, it is ours. It is ours together. It is an ongoing struggle for our homeland in peace, not just in an afterlife, but already today in the Philippines, here and now. I wish you all a successful encounter with one another.
Thank you, Father Joel. And now to give us the rationale of today's program and to introduce the first keynote speaker, I would like to call the director of the, and at the same time, one of the convener of the Bayanihan, Bantay Bayanihan. I would like to call Dr. Gail Ilagan. That's all.
Gandang hapon ho sa inyong lahat. We are here this afternoon to talk about the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, and as most of us are aware, it was pretty much historic when it was signed on 27 March 2014, ending a very long 17-year period of negotiations for a political settlement on the issue of the Bangsamoro. Hopefully, it will not end there, and it will continue towards its intended course. And so we in the academe would like to put together a venue, an opportunity for all of us to get together and to raise awareness, to talk about the Bangsamoro. What does it mean for the government? What does it mean for our Muslim brothers and sisters? What does it mean for Mindanao? What does it mean for the security sector? We are very happy to see that the PNP is in full force today, the PNP being the institution that would be most affected by arrangements for normalization. May I request our blue ladies and gentlemen to please rise. Andito po, sir. Thank you for supporting this forum. Kung wala ho yung mga pulis doon sa labas, andito ho sila. Ganito po ka-importante yung comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. So I will not bore you anymore with the details. I'm sure you're here to hear about what the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro is all about. And to start off our discussion, may I please join me in welcoming the Vice Chair for Political Affairs of the Mora Islamic Liberation Front, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Mr. Gadsali Jafar. Dito po.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yaumiddin wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All praise are only to Allah, the Lord of the universe. May peace and blessings of Allah be on His last noble messenger, Muhammad. Peace be upon him, on his relatives, his companions, and all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. My respect and courtesy to the Filipino leaders in attendance, the Honorable Mayor of the great and most disciplined city of Davao, Mayor Rodrigo Duterte, GPH, Chief Peace Negotiator, Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer, the President of Ateneo de Davao University, Father Joel Tabora, Bantay Bayan Davao Convenor, Dr. Gail Tan Ilagan, men in uniform who are present here, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. PNP Director for Police Community Relations Group, Chief Superintendent Nestor Feria Kinsay Jr., Colonel Greg Almirol, AP Group Commander for 5th Civil Relations Service. Representative from the religious sector and President of Peace Advocates, Zamboanga, Father Angel Calvo. Representatives of the civil society organizations, representatives from the academy, Mr. Mussolini Lidasan of Al-Kalam Institute for Islamic Identities and Dialogue in Southern Asia. The media people around here who are my fellow workers for freedom and justice. Honored guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen, I accept our greetings of peace. Peace with you. Before anything else, please join me extending my sincere thanks and gratitude to Almighty God, Allah, for granting us a President of the Philippines, His Excellency, President Benigno Aquino III, whose sincerity and strong political will in solving the Bangsamoro issue is indispensable. Also, a sincere thanks and gratitude to the top leadership of the MILF, the Central Committee, especially to our chairman for not giving up the peace negotiations. Despite of much sacrifices and difficulties and hindrances during the more than 17 long years of negotiating with the government of the Philippines, which eventually led to the signing of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro on March 27, 2014. To the Malaysian Prime Minister, His Excellency Dato Sri Haji Muhammad Najib bin Tuan Haji Abdul Razak, and the Malaysian facilitator, Tengku Dato Abdul Ghaffar bin Tengku Muhammad, for their sincere untiring and sustained support to the Mindanao peace process. The GPH Peace Panel, headed by Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer, and the MIL Peace Panel, headed by Brother in Islam, Hajir Iqbal. The Office of the Presidential Assistance on the Peace Process, OPAP, headed by Secretary Teresita Jing Dilis, the Bangsamoro and the Filipino people who patiently waited and extended their countless support to the GPH-MIL negotiations. Maraming salamat po sa kanilang lahat. Ang Panginoon, higit na makapangyarihan lamang ang may kakayahan magbigay ng nararapat at katumbas na gantimpala sa kanila, sa inyo, at sa ating lahat. Bago po sa aking mensahe, karangalan ko pong ipakilala sa inyo ang mga membro ng delegation ng MIL na kasama ko ngayon, dumadalo sa mahalagang okasyong ito. At ito po'y sina Pastor Abel El Chico. Mangyari po lamang kayong tumayo po. Kapatid na Abu Ubaida, siya po ang chairman ng isang very important committee ng Central Committee ng MILF. At siya po yung membro ng Central Committee. Brother Muhammad Amin, siya pong sekretary namin sa Central Committee. Kasama rin namin po si Sheikh Muhammad Shoaib. Hindi ko alam kung nakahabol siya, ang chairman po ng BDA. Ang chairman ng Provincial Committee ng MIL sa Tawi-Tawi, Abdullah Ahang, at ang kanyang vice chairman. Ang chairman ng Provincial Committee in MILF, si Cesar Alil, at ang kanyang vice chairman. Kasama niya po ang Deputy Commander ng Western Mindanao Front ng Bangsamoro Islamic Armed Forces, ang dating retired colonel po ng Philippine Air Force, Brother Basalon Kamlon. Siya po yung anak ng magiting na mandirigma noon na si Kamlon in Sulu. Ang patambatang manager ng BDA in Western Mindanao, at siya po ang vice chairman ng provincial chapter ng Sulu ng United Justice Party, Bangsamoro Party ng 1st District 1, si Don Imar Ajiji. Kasama rin po ang tatlo sa senior staff ng aking opisina si Professor Rabi Angkal, si Engineer Alihar Mama, at si Abdullah Adam, at the last but not the least, ang aking anak na dito rin nagtapos sa pamantasang ito, Ateneo de Davao, si Bots, ang tawag namin sa kanya, tunay ng pangalan ni Johari. At ang aking son-in-law from Mati, Davao Oriental, Engineer Adam. Wala na pa akong nakalimutan sa mga kasama ko. Mga mahal naming mamamayan ng Mindanao, matagal na panahon ang lumipas. Mula 1968 hanggang 2008 o hanggang ngayon. Di katagalan mulang itatag ang Republika ng Pilipinas. Almost 40 years. Laganap ang matindi, malupit at walang humpay na digmaan sa Mindanao sa pagitan ng hukbong sandatang lakas ng Pilipinas at ng pamahalaan ng Pilipinas at mandirigmang Bangsamoro Liberation Front. Digmaan nagdulot ng pakitil ng maraming buhay, hindi lamang buhay ng mga mandirigma. Ngunit damay ang mga bata at matanda, lalaki at babae, Muslim at Kristiyano. Ang naigupo ng digmaan at nadibing sa Mindanao. Digmaang nagtulot ng bilyong-bilyong halaga ng mga kayamanan ng Muslim, Kristiyano at katutubo ay naging nauwi sa wala. Digmaan nagdulot ng matinding problema sa mga muspos at batang Bangsamoro na ang akala ay wala na silang pag-asa sa buhay. Ang akala ay wala na silang kinabukasan. Digma nagdulot ng pagbulusok at pababang ekonomiya ng bayang Pilipinas. Sinasabi nila that at the height of the Bangsamoro struggle, for self-determination, no less than 20 million pesos a day ang ginagastos ng gobyerno just to sustain the war. Hindi ko po alam kung gaano katotoo yun. Mga kapatid na naghahanap ng tunay na kapayapaan, at katarungan sa Mindanao. Ito ang kondisyon ng mga mamamayan ng Mindanao kahit sa kasalukuyan. Nanatili sa loob ng maraming taon na ganito. Ngunit, maaring sa isang pagkakataon, maaring ito'y magbago inshallah, God willing. Magbago mula kadiliman patungong liwanag. The GPH and the MILF is moving for a change, changing the decades dark situation caused by deprivation, aggression, and oppression against the Bangsamoro. It is an attempt to change by way of peace negotiations that finally, on October 15, Monday, at 3:47 in the afternoon in Malacanang Palace, nalagda ng matuwid na daan tungo sa matiwasay na pagbabago sa pamamagitan ng GPH, MILF, framework on agreement na finally, the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. Ladies and gentlemen, let me emphasize that CAB is all about change, reform, and transformation. From imposed identity to Bangsamoro, from integration to territorial autonomy, from economic deprivation to fiscal autonomy. Comprehensive agreement is a system of building institutions or change towards establishment of new government for all in the area of the proposed Bangsamoro government. A government that will provide good and righteous and God-fearing governance and much better services for the lasting peace, progress, and development in Mindanao. Peace-loving Bangsamoro and Filipino people. This is what we are waiting for. Ito na ang hinihintay natin. For so long. This is what we are looking for. Ito ang hinahanap namin. Ito ang hinahanap natin. Kapayapaan, na may dignidad. And this is what we are working together. Now, today, with the signed political documents, the signal is so strong that this is the time. So together we must work in the side of peace with common direction towards full implementation of GPH-MILF signed agreement. Let me help you recall. The CAB is not the first agreement that the Bangsamoro had entered with the government of the Philippines. We had before the 1976 GRP-MNLF Tripoli Agreement, granting to the Bangsamoro the territorial autonomy to 13 provinces and 9 cities. Again, in 1996, the GRP-MNLF final peace agreement with Southern Philippines Council for Peace and Development as its transition mechanism. And now, the GRP-MILF comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. What we noticed are the common feelings and reactions of the people not only the Bangsamoro people. Towards a successful peace talks of the GPH-MILF. The people are happy, cheerful, extending congratulatory messages and full of expectation. This is what we have today. We have the signed written CAB or comprehensive agreement to the Bangsamoro. Yet, we in the MILF and the GPH are still struggling to fully implement the agreements or starting to implement. Ladies and gentlemen, what is it telling us? It tells us, should we fail to implement the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, then the question is, will the Bangsamoro accept it? Kung nabigo tayo, may patupad ito. Another question. What will the Bangsamoro do? Pag nabigo tayo, anong gagawin ng mga Bangsamoro? Let me also emphasize here our appeal to the Senate and the Congress of the Philippines to act in the side of peace. Because peace is today's common will of the people. Ito ang gusto ng mga tao, ang nakararami sa mamamayang Pilipino at Bangsamoro. The Bangsamoro people had already spoken when almost 500,000 attended the simultaneous peace rallies held in several parts of Mindanao. Kahit sa Davao City, meron. In Sultan Kudarat Province, meron. In General Santos City, meron. In Pagadian City, meron. In Lano Norte, meron. And these are not areas of the Bangsamoro government. Yung mga rallies nito ay spearheaded by concerned civil society organizations and non-government organizations, coordinated by Mindanao Alliance for Peace, MAP, last May 4, 2014. And their common message is a strong appeal to both lower and upper houses to please pass, and please enact into law the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law. We are certain the Bangsamoro Basic Law as proposed is not an Islamic law. Hindi po batas ng Islam ito. Sapagkat as far as Islamic law is concerned, hindi na kailangan isulat. Sapagkat ang batas ng Islam ay ang Quran. But these are rules how to govern the Bangsamoro government, inshallah. It's neither a law that will alienate the rights of the Filipino. But the BBL, or Bangsamoro Basic Law, is a law only to provide and facilitate the meaningful and fair implementation of the GPH-MILF Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro. Further, let me tell you that the enactment into law of the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law signals the coming of a lasting peace. I repeat that. it signals the coming of a lasting peace that will bring sustainable progress and development in Mindanao. My dear peace-loving people of Mindanao, we heard the President of the Philippines, His Excellency Benigno S. Aquino III, and the Malaysian Prime Minister, His Excellency Dato Sri Haji Muhammad Najib bin Tun Haji Abdul Razak, in the respective messages during the CAB signing in Malacanang last March 27, 2014. President Aquino said, and I quote, "I have to start that I fully empathize with our Muslim countrymen. Like them, my family experienced how impossible it was to achieve redress of legitimate grievances as we were oppressed by dictatorial government. To those who will not join us, I ask, are you really that confident that we will have another singular opportunity like the one we have today? In the coming months and years, let us exert even greater effort into making the path of peace more inclusive, inviting more to join this advocacy and to continue the peaceful and progressive future that we are envisioning. So many people have suffered for so long. So many of our stakeholders have worked so hard to arrive this point. I will not let peace be snatched from my people again." Unquote. The Malaysian Prime Minister said, and I quote, "I promise President Aquino that Malaysia will continue to assist with development. We are willing to help and build institutions, strengthen education, improve agriculture. This promise is done for as long as it is needed. This peace has strengthened the bond of trust between our countries as we look ahead to a brighter future. Bangsamoro. I pledge Malaysia's continued support." Unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give peace a chance. That is our call. Simula pa noon hanggang ngayon, ganun din ang panawagan namin. It is our strong call. Together, we ask the Congress and Senate to approve into law the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law. Because the approval of the Bangsamoro Basic Law as proposed into law has significant bearing to national interest. We all believe in peace. We all believe in progress and development. And above all, we all believe in God. United in our common vision for peace, let us move forward together for peace, justice, progress, and freedom. Brothers and sisters, bago ko po wakasan ang aking mensahe, nakalimutan ko pong ipakilala yung kabilang sa delegation po namin. Kabilang po si Dr. Idi Ali, siya pong presidente ng professionals in Tawi-Tawi at dating chancellor po ng MSU in Tawi-Tawi. Kasama po niya si Director Hamid Laja Kahal. Dati pong siyang assistant cabinet ng ARM. Kasama rin po si Dr. Alpha Amirul Haj. At kasama po si Ginong Sirata Dais sa negosyan. Nabanggit ko na kanina pero tumayo na kayo. Tato. Brothers and sisters, we thank you for coming and joining this very important occasion and giving us the chance to talk to all of you from the bottom of our hearts. I ask the Almighty God to grant us His blessings. May Allah reward unity among the Bangsamoro people and the Filipino people in this world, and more blessings to come. Thank you. Maraming salamat. Wabillahi taufiq. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, MILF Vice Chairman Gadzali Jafar. Let's proceed to hear the keynote speech of our next keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, our next keynote speaker, a University of the Philippines political science professor, is the current chair of the Government Peace Panel. Until her new appointment as the chair of the Government Peace Panel, she was advisor of the Government Peace Panel's technical working group on the issue of normalization. An accomplished academic and a longtime peace advocate, she was the director of the UP Third World Studies Center from 2000 to 2003 and a convener of the program on peace, democratization, and human rights of the UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies until 2005 before joining the Peace Panel in 2010. In 2005, she was one of the 27 Filipinas who was included in the move to nominate 1,000 women for the 2005 Nobel Peace Prize. She was also involved in the international campaign to ban landmines, which won the Nobel Peace Prize. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome the current chair of the Government Peace Panel, Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer.
Father Tabora and officers, staff, students of the Ateneo de Manila University. Ateneo de Davao. The Manila is the branch, right? Okay. The other organizers of this conference, Al-Alcam Institute, also of Ateneo de Davao, and Bantay Bayanihan, our friends from civil society, from, of course, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, led by Vice Chair Gadzali Jafar, and the gentlemen who make up his delegation. I'm very pleased to meet all of you. Some of you I have met before, but most of you for the first time. The police force, Philippine National Police, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we have General Bernardo here, with the Eastern Mindanao Command, who is also sitting in our Joint Normalization Committee, the JNC committee that we have just set up for the normalization program. Friends, advocates from the international community, the members of the diplomatic community, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. You are here because you choose peace in the Bangsamoro, in Mindanao, in our country, in our communities, our families. Maybe some of you want to choose peace but are not sure. You have fears, you have concerns, you're worried that this is not going to work. I think that is really understandable, that we have all of these questions before us, not only constitutional or legal questions, but very basic practical questions. After all, this thing that we are trying to do has a long history. It's very complex. There are many different players, not only inside the prospective core territory of the Bangsamoro, but also in the whole country. And equally, many and different perspectives. Maybe also because peace requires all the best from human beings, all the best intentions from all of us for it really to happen. I can tell you that even in government, there are all of these questions, even within our ranks. I remember very well, not too long ago, when we met with some of our officials to discuss with them the program on the disbandment of the private armed groups, which is part and parcel of the whole normalization program that we will be doing. And one question from an official that we had to address was, what makes you think you can do it this time? So that was the challenge, and we are not running away from that challenge. Only a few days ago, we met with the COMELEC. We are very pleased that the COMELEC has already organized a special committee that will prepare for the plebiscite for the Bangsamoro, which we hope to happen next year, early next year. And in fact, the new party that the MILF has put up, the Bangsamoro United Justice Party, has already been meeting with the COMELEC, inquiring about the registration process. But in any case, in this meeting, the assessment that was given to us with regard to history of elections in the region was, of course, not very optimistic. And the conclusion was not optimistic as well. And I had to ask, why is it that you assume that this plebiscite will be as bad as previous elections? If that is the assumption, then certainly let's just all go home and not do anything. Precisely, we were having that kind of meeting in order to ensure the legitimacy, the kind of popular participation, and to really, for the will of the people to emerge in the upcoming plebiscite for the Bangsamoro. Definitely, peace requires a lot of hard work. It requires patience and empathy. Between the two parties, we know, for instance, we'll be working together, and we know that both of us have our own institutional or organizational weaknesses. I think it was Chairman Iqbal who said that there is no perfect agreement. And I can very well add to that that there is no perfect party or parties, no perfect parties to an agreement. Government, as you know, is not a monolithic entity. We have the separation of the different branches of government. Within each branch, there will be many actors, many interests, many perspectives also coming to play. We know that the MILF has a good organizational structure, but we also know that they will need our help to be able to carry everybody on board in this process. And there will be mistakes, there will be manifestations of some of these weaknesses, but we know that we have to understand and we do need to be patient because peace does take a lot of time and effort. We know that peace requires trust and confidence. Trust is very important, and I think that's what made it possible for us to get this far. We know that we need faith for all of this to, for all of us to really not give up. We have come across so many obstacles. We will be negotiating in Kuala Lumpur. there will be some outbreak of fighting somewhere, not between the government and the MILF, but with other actors, but somehow, getting into that complex situation because of the presence of different, in the same community, that kind of, the presence of the different armed groups. But in any case, we kept the trust, we kept the confidence, and we kept the faith. And this is something that we will have to continue to build on in order really to move forward on all the things that we have agreed to undertake. So, lastly, maybe we can say, to have this peace in Mindanao, we need very good templates. And this is where we get down to the brass tacks. The comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro provided much of these elements. It's there, and so it will still have to be implemented. But what really makes these templates different from past initiatives? First of all, it was very clear from the beginning when we embarked on this project under this administration, we knew that this process would truly have to be inclusive. We were negotiating with one party. We now have a good peace partner with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. But even the MILF has said, Chairman Murad himself has said in his speech, very powerful speech in Malacanang on the signing of the comprehensive agreement, that this agreement is not just for the Bangsamoro. It is for everybody in the Bangsamoro as well as for the whole country. To that extent, we have to ensure that our processes, everything that we are putting will always bring that forward, that principle of inclusiveness. Secondly, this template is founded not on the principle of patronage, which might explain much of the weaknesses in the past processes. It is not founded on building that continuing dependency or continuing that kind of dependency. Rather, it aims to truly empower. It also aims to achieve social justice. Somehow, when you hear all these constitutional questions being raised against the comprehensive agreement, there is always reference to some parts of the Constitution. Namely, for instance, the aspect on the Constitution that mentions the ownership of the state of the public domain. When, in fact, ownership is not really the issue here. When we talk about revenue generation and wealth sharing, it is about the sharing from the benefits of the resources, not so much on that principle. And what usually is left out in many of the discussions in the Constitution is a very important chapter, an article in the Constitution on social justice. Because this is what it's all about. Bishop Quevedo, now our Cardinal Quevedo, did say that the issue of the Bangsamoro is an issue of justice. And the Constitution precisely provides for these principles that would address a long-standing conflict in our country. When he talked about equitable sharing of the wealth of society, equitable distribution of power, especially those preferential rights, especially for those who have been left behind, the social and cultural inequities that have been generated by the kind of history and development that the Republic of the Philippines went through. So certainly this agreement, this template is founded on these principles of empowerment and social justice. It is not one that tries to continue that system of dependency and patronage. Okay. I think one other very important template has to do with the different elements that we are trying to put in place. I think if we can show that in the PowerPoint. Let me just course you through this kind of comprehensive approach that we are doing in this process. I think the best example will be reflected in this matrix. The letters are very small. but maybe we can just show the categories, the different dimensions. So here, to reflect on, to show that this is the approach that can probably make a big difference in previous approaches that have been used for, in previous peace agreements, is that kind of comprehensive approach. Actually, if you have your copies of the agreement, you will find the matrix in the on page, well, it's almost at the back, because this is a matrix that's appended to the annex on normalization, which was the last document together with the addendum on Bangsamoro waters that we signed in January. So very clearly from this approach, you can see dimensions. First column will reflect the different political measures that will have to be undertaken. From the signing of the annex on normalization, the comprehensive agreement, to the creation of the decommissioning body. Phase 2 refers to the passage of the basic law, which is actually your roadmap. And then the establishment of the Bangsamoro Police Force, which would happen upon the institution of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority and the regular Bangsamoro government, and all the way to the functioning of the regular Bangsamoro government. And in each of these phases, you can see the different elements, from the mechanisms that will be constituted, the peacekeeping teams in the forms of the joint peace and security teams that will be put up, together with the government, the armed forces and the Philippine National Police. The second dimension refers to the socio-economic programs, confidence-building measures which include amnesty, and the transformation of the 6 acknowledged MILF camps to become productive civilian communities, the matter of decommissioning of MILF forces and weapons, the demilitarization of the area, particularly redeployment of the armed forces of the Philippines as soon as the security situation makes that possible, policing reform, especially for the Bangsamoro Police Force. If we really push hard for all of these mechanisms, especially as envisioned by the report of the Independent Commission on Policing, the police force for the Bangsamoro can even be the model police in the whole country. If we really make this work. It's going to be experimental, but it can show how things can be done differently. The ICP report, by the way, has been submitted to the panels, but the 2 parties have agreed to embargo the report until the 2 parties are able to cascade the different recommendations to their internal constituencies, after which that report will be made public for your scrutiny. Then the disbandment of private armed groups, and finally the transitional justice and reconciliation measures. So this is a unique program, not only in the history of peace process in the Philippines, but also perhaps in the rest of the world, in the kind of comprehensiveness in the approach that we have put together in this, that is very much reflected in this matrix. Secondly, of course, all of these will require monitoring and evaluation. When we look back at the experience of the peace agreement, in the peace agreement with the MNLF, which, by the way, the government is not abrogating. How can you abrogate something that has already been almost fully implemented? And the few items that have not been fully implemented, that's the one that's on the review table. But in any case, one of the weaknesses that was seen in that process was the lack of follow-through mechanism. Now, in our template, as provided for in the different annexes in the CAB, you will find that there are several different mechanisms that will be put in place or have been put in place to see through the implementation, the monitoring, the assessment, and even the facilitation and mediation of the implementation of the different components of the agreement. For instance, We have a third-party monitoring team made up of foreign and national individuals who will independently monitor the implementation of the different agreements. There will be an independent decommissioning body made up of 3 foreign experts and 4 national experts who will oversee the decommissioning component. There will be the Joint Normalization Commission, as mentioned, as well as the Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission. And in addition, the 2 panels will continue to exist until the signing of the exit agreement, together with the Malaysian facilitator and the International Contact Group, who are the friends of the process, and they sit as observers during the formal meetings of the government and the MILF panels. So you can see that these templates would make that kind of a big difference with regard to the implementation of the different components of the agreement. Of course, the other template is the Bangsamoro political entity itself, the institutional design of the new Bangsamoro government that will be put up upon the passage of the law and the ratification of the areas that have been targeted for inclusion. So again, what would make the Bangsamoro different from the ARM? That's a very common question. And to give you some very quick answers with regard to that, one, of course, is it will have a quite different structure of government. Perhaps many of you who have been following up this process will know this very well. It will have a parliamentary form of government or a ministerial form of government. That's very, very different from the kinds of structure that we have been accustomed to dun sa ating mga local governments, where we directly elect the provincial governor and the vice governor. In this structure, the members of the assembly or the parliament will be elected, and they will elect the chief minister among themselves, form the cabinet, most of whom will come as well from the assembly, and many other elements that are not there in the current structure of the ARM. So that kind of an institutional design in terms of the structure of government is envisioned to allow for a broader representation across the different sectors and groups, geographic groups as well as sectoral groups, that in order to ensure that the space for political participation will be opened up. Secondly, it will encourage the formation of political parties. And again, to that extent, the MILF is showing the way that it can actually be done. We hope our brothers and sisters in the MNLF will also seriously consider putting up their political parties so that they can also participate in the election in 2016 for this Bangsamoro government. So institutional design is one other major new template, not only in terms of the structure of government, the allocation, the range of devolved powers that the Bangsamoro government will exercise, but also on the aspect of fiscal autonomy. Because as we know very well, you cannot have political autonomy without fiscal autonomy. So some of the innovative features that the parties have agreed on and the BTC has put into the draft basic law, and this will be the one that will be submitted in Congress, is the notion of an annual black grant, which frees the Bangsamoro government from the usual system of budgeting, frees it from being merely a part of the line items that the national government negotiates with Congress every year under the General Appropriations Act. So halimbawa, ang mangyayari dito, there will be some kind of a formula similar to the Internal Revenue Allotment that will determine how much money the Bangsamoro government will get every year so that it is able to plan out their own development programs for according to what they see as important and needed for the progress of the Bangsamoro. I mean, these are just some of the elements of the new institutional design. I know that most of you are awaiting to have a copy, have a peek, or to be able to hold in your hands a copy of the law that will be submitted, the bill that will be submitted to Congress. But do understand that this process is going through a very fast, fast-track review inside the Office of the President. There will be consultations between the BTC and the Office of the President, so that together they will, at the soonest possible time, be able to submit this proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law to Congress. You know, we are not in need of sponsors, both in the lower house or in the Senate, for this Congress. Because as you know, any bill will have to have its sponsors from inside Congress, and there are many people who are many members of Congress who are very much interested to be among the sponsors for this basic law. So for civil society, please understand that it can create a lot of confusion if many versions of the drafts come out in public. Just right now, we know the Napoles lists is creating all of this confusion, and we do not want that. In the end, people might, raise a lot of questions that might not have been necessary because only because so many versions are coming out. So please just wait for that. It's happening very soon. More than anyone, it's the President who has been pushing all of us, the MILF, the government, to finish the proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law as soon as possible, so you can be sure it's not going to take a long time in this review process before it is finally submitted to Congress. So I guess that is my main message for today. Peace requires a lot of patience, empathy, acknowledgement of our own respective organizational weaknesses, only because we know that we can count on each other to be able to help us out. We know that we need faith, trust, and confidence. And we need all these new templates, all these creative templates that can guarantee that we will be able to move forward whatever we have signed and deliver this to everyone who have been waiting for this for the longest time. So the leadership is there, at least from the national government. There is unity in purpose from inside government. I can tell you, the Philippine National Police will be putting up a special team that will be focused on the different dimensions, the different elements where they will be playing important roles, and we will be working very, very closely with this team from the Philippine National Police. There's that kind of unity inside government for this. And I'm sure, just like in this room, there's a lot of goodwill that is very important for this process to work out very well and really, really make a big difference in our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer. Ladies and gentlemen, we have more than 60 organizations right now here inside the room. We would like to recognize half of it and later another half. So we would like to recognize the Philippine National Police, also the Philippine Army, also from the Department of Education, from the United Nations volunteer, from the CS, ADDU, PCCMG, PAZ Zamboanga, PYLG, from the Asia Foundation, from the Youth for Peace Philippines, from TDH Germany, from the Bangsamoro Group, from the Madrasa Group. We also have from the Socoteco, also from the Consulate General of Malaysia, from the Philippine Air Force, from the BTC, from the IPDI, from the Centrist Democratic Party, from PBSP, from Task Force Davao, from TJI, from the barangays in Davao City, from the Peace Builders, from the Task Force of Jansan, from the AIM Global Impact, and from CSO and University of the Philippines, Mindanao. We are going to take a short break after the 4 reactors have already delivered their reaction to the keynote speeches of our guests. I would like to call the first reactor from the security sector. Ladies and gentlemen, the first reactor is PNP Director for Police Community Relations Group, Chief Superintendent Nestor Feria Kinsay Jr.
Thank you, sir. To our Chief Peace Negotiator, Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrez, ma'am. To our 10th Infantry Division Commander, Major General Ariel Bernardo, sir. Vice Chair for Political Affairs, MILF, Honorable Gensali Japar, sir. To Father Joel Tabora, other guests from academe, from indigenous peoples, from our civil society, NGOs, from our diplomatic communities, from our business sector, our religious sector, of course from the AFP, and from the Philippine National Police, from our brothers from MILF, and other advocates of peace. Maayong hapon po sa inyong tanan. First of all, I'd like to thank our God Almighty for making this peace forum into a reality. Of course, I'd like also to thank Father Joel Tabora and the Bayanihan, Bantay Bayanihan convener, headed by Dr. Gail Tan, for inviting us for today's peace forum. Our theme for today's peace forum is Peace, a Treasure Towards a Lasting Progress in Mindanao. I think all of us here wants peace in Mindanao, and this is for our children's treasure. Actually, I will discuss to you what the Philippine National Police is doing right now, and later on, I will discuss about the comprehensive agreement on Bangsamoro. The Philippine National Police to date is more than a century and a decade. It was then the Philippine Constabulary, and on August 8, 1975, by virtue of Presidential Decree 763, all police forces nationwide were incorporated to be known as the Integrated National Police, or the INP, which the Philippine Constabulary was the nucleus. This gave birth to the PCINP. And on December 13, 1990, the Republic Act 6975, the law creating the Philippine National Police, was signed by our first woman president, Madam Corazon Coanco Aquino. And 47 days after this landmark law, on January 29, 1991, President Aquino led in the formal birth of the Philippine National Police, which is national in scope and civilian in character. and envisioned to be a fortress of internal defense, unyielding to the elements of crime. The nation's peacekeepers' metamorphosis from the Philippine Constabulary to PCINP up to becoming Philippine National Police had been named only. The character of the institution and those of its men and women in uniform had remained and always shall remain and be ingrained in each and every peacekeeper, alluding to the nation's peacekeeper as winning their way, not by the sword, had been more than just words. This quote, often repeated by our nation's leaders, had truly evolved and had influenced the very heart and spirit of the peacekeeper. The statutory power of the Philippine National Police to enforce laws and ordinances relative to the protection of lives and properties, to maintain peace and order, and take all necessary steps to ensure public safety, to investigate and prevent crime, effect arrest of criminal offenders, bring offenders to justice, and assist in their prosecution, to detain arrested person or persons for a period of not beyond what's prescribed by law after informing the persons so detained of all their rights under the Philippine Constitution, and to exercise the general powers to make arrests, search and seizure, and enforce pertinent laws. All these, including the deputized statutory power of the PNP, are implemented through the Quad concept of the Philippine policing. The Quad, the intelligence, operations, investigation, and police community relations under the philosophy of service, honor, and justice, anchored on the core values maka-Diyos, makabayan, makatao, and makakalikasan, synergistically act as one, united towards a highly capable, effective, and credible police service, working in partnership with a responsive community towards the attainment of a safer place to live, work, and do business. The PNP must always come to terms to address all the challenges in peacekeeping. To further strengthen the PNP towards its vision, the PNP Reform and Reorganization Act of 1998 was enacted on February 17, 1998, and amending certain provisions of RA 6975. Growing was not that easy. In fact, the PNP had experienced a lot of growth pains. There were ups and downs and trials along the way. By the turn of the millennium, national perception surveys showed that the organization was among the most corrupt government agencies in the country. The PNP did what has to be done. In-depth studies made by the PNP Reform Commission study under former Justice Secretary Cedfrey Ordonez, the Joint United Nations Development Program, and the Government of the Philippines, and the PNP Transformation Plan came up with the findings and recommendations which became the basis for a 10-year PNP Integrated Transformation Program, which was framed in 2005. This became the PNP's roadmap for lasting reform. In December 2008, the Millennium Challenge Corporation reselected the Philippines as compact eligible for fiscal year 2009, with a compact agreement that will provide the anti-poverty financial grant after having met the eligibility criteria in 3 areas: ruling justly, investing in people and economic freedom, therefore compelling the adoption of the Performance Governance System, or PGS, utilizing the balanced scorecard framework with a view of providing a common reference and measure of progress for the governance and reform initiatives that should be undertaken to support the national strategic priorities at various levels of Philippine government and Philippine society. And on July 9, 2009, the Philippine National Police was obliged, together with other 5 national government agencies, to participate in the MCC program, requiring the institutionalization of the performance governance system. The PNP was chosen mainly because it was deemed ready for productive participation in good governance based on the progress of its integrated transformation program, which provided a good basis for the adoption of comprehensive governance system anchored on the impact to the community that the PNP directly serves. With the initiation into the performance governance system, the PNP's mindset was transformed from the traditional reactive perspective to a more proactive, preventive, focused, and strategic thinking process, thus gradually removing management barriers, encouraging more active personnel participation, and closing the communication gaps that pervade the organization's bureaucratic system. We are fully aware that we are on the right path. A strategy refresh was conducted from January 11, 2012 with the PNP Center for Police Strategy Management relative to the PNP Patrol Plan 2030. Patrol is an acronym which means Peace and Order Agenda for Transformation and Upholding the Rule of Law. We are bent towards transformation. The PNP was conferred with the PGS proficiency status on September 26, 2012 by the Institute of Solidarity in Asia and the National Competitiveness Council. In addition to this, the PNP was awarded the Silver Governance Trailblazer Award. To ensure that the organization's cutting edge is kept its sharpest, our Chief PNP, Police Director General Alan Lamadrid Purisima, underscored the PNP's commitment to sincerely serve and protect isang serbisyong makatotohanan with a strategic focus Code P 2013 and beyond, which was incorporated in our PNP Patrol Plan 2030. The strategic focus Code P means competency of each and every policeman through our organizational development and reforms, instilling discipline within the ranks, promoting excellence in the performance of our duties, and instituting professionalism at all levels of the organization. Deep into the Code P, the PNP was bestowed with second Silver Governance Trailblazer Award on March 19, 2013. We have to sustain our momentum to be truly institutionalized. The PNP, to be in sync with the challenging times, the PNP has to place at the very top of its strategy map a one-line summary of its vision, a highly capable, effective, and credible police service. Relative to this, we have accomplished landmark programs. 4 perspectives in PNP scorecards are needed to be satisfied by 2015. All the PNP units and offices are aiming to be institutionalized by year 2015. And the Police Community Relations Group, where I belong, is one of them. The path towards institutionalization was test how compliant and proficient the organization will be by that time. The 4 perspectives in the PNP scorecards are resource management, learning and growth, process excellence, and community. This 4th perspective being the most important because the community, the Filipino people, are the very beneficiary of the PNP's improved police service. The objective of attaining safer place to live, work, and do business under this perspective will be measured utilizing the Global Peace Index. The Philippine policing anchored on the quad concept of policing sees the PNP working closely with the community at the very grassroots. The unit not only being the heart of policing, but the front line of policing. And as I've said, as a man in uniform, our responsibility lies foremost in being a PCR man, a police community relations officer working for a harmonious and effective police community partnership in the maintenance of peace and order and public safety, with the end view of empowering our people towards community ownership with self-reliant communities at pace with the march to progress and development. The oft-repeated quote I mentioned earlier, winning their way not by the sword, aptly applies to our nation's peacekeeper, more especially to the Police Community Relations Group, the National Operational Unit for Police Community Relations, the PNP's tagapag-ugnay, thus the veritable bridge to the community and stakeholders. In step with the 21st century, the PCRG broke tradition using innovative approaches, making a crucial paradigm shift in policing to be more effective and efficient in bridging the police to the community and stakeholders through community intervention and information initiatives. These grassroots initiatives without borders, reaching out to each and every Filipino in close coordination with the local chief executives. The PCRG will go nationwide on this, with our PCRG field office to be created in the process. On the pursuit of peaceful Mindanao, the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, a product of the pursuit for a solution to the Bangsamoro question with honor, justice, and dignity for all concerned, ends the armed hostilities between the government of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Both parties are committed to protect and enhance the right of the Bangsamoro people and other inhabitants in the Bangsamoro base on set goals and parameters. The comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro is the result of numerous peace negotiations which began since 1997 and which continued through the efforts of government of Malaysia at the start of 2001, leading to the signing of the framework agreement on the Bangsamoro in October 2012 and up to its signing on March 27, 2014. Under the CAB's principle of implementation, on the mechanisms and modalities for the actual implementation, specifically on the normalization of previously conflict-affected areas and their transformation into peaceful communities, the PNP, through our Police Community Relations Group, will do its share and will fully cooperate in the implementation of the law in support to the Bangsamoro and in nurturing the integrity of the whole peace process. The PNP, as a member of the Joint Peace and Security Team, under the normalization phase, shall judiciously abide with the rules and regulations to be laid down for this purpose, especially on the organization of a police force for the Bangsamoro, which will be consistent with the constitutional principle of one Philippine National Police, a police force which is professional, civilian in character, effective and efficient in law enforcement, fair and impartial and accountable under the law for its actions. As Filipinos, all of us are one brother to another. I am most confident that the fundamental ingredients to creating a most harmonious Filipino community under one constitution and one flag will be most beneficial not only to the Philippines but to the whole world. Gandang harapan po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you, Chief Superintendent Kinsay. Our next reactor from the security sector is the AFP Group Commander for 5th Civil Relations Service, Colonel Greg T. Almerol. Sir?
Maraming salamat po. I will forego the acknowledgement of the distinguished presenter. Of course, Ako po si Colonel Greg Almerol. Actually, kinakabahan po ako ngayon. Because it is my first time to present, especially to this very important occasion or that happened to our country. Actually, I am also from Mindanao by birth. I was assigned here almost half of my career. I was assigned in Mindanao. I was also assigned in Central Mindanao for 10 years. Kaya medyo alam ko yung nangyayari. I was in Cotabato in 1989 up to 1999. I pretty well know yung nangyari noon. Yung sinabi po ni Chairman Gajali Japar na since 1968 up to 2008, I think, you have mentioned that the darkest, maraming nangyari, maraming casualty, and I myself have seen that. And then of course, sa 6ID ako noon, nakita ko rin na on the part of 6ID, marami rin kaming casualties. And then, natandaan ko rin na sinabi niya na I think this is our fortune time to really achieve a genuine peace in Mindanao. I hope that sinabi naman ni Ma'am Pereira kanina, everything has been in place. The roadmap for peace has already been established with the signing of the comprehensive agreement for Bangsamoro. The bigger challenge is really the implementation of the peace deal. We need the security sector is very much will support that this peace deal will come into realization. Of course, nabanggit din yung meron din tayong mga closure strategy with the MILF, I think OPAP, and then of course ISMINCOM and 10ID under the leadership of my former boss, General Bernardo, is working hard to achieve this end. And then, of course, maraming stake dito because the stake is for the people's safety. I myself have seen that before, 10 years, 20 years ago, that napakaraming casualty talaga doon. And then, yung nandun nga ako sa Cotabato, minsan mapagkamalan nila ako na Muslim because my family name is Almerol. I do remember may commander noon sa MILF, Amerol. Kaya tinanggal lang yung L sa akin. Pareho na kami ng pangalan. I think, sir, meron, sir, di ba si Commander Amerol? I think may mga challenges pa rin yung AAP. Lahat kami sa security sector knew that may mga peace spoilers pa rin. Kaya nandun pa rin kami to support that the peace deal will not be spoiled. That is our mandate given to us. And then we have to see to it that the path to peace and the roadmap to peace will be achieved and realized. And then we must always, we in the security sector always keep faith in the process. Especially us na nandito sa Mindanao, both the AAP and PNP assigned here in Mindanao. And then, natandaan ko rin na sinabi ni Chairman Japar kanina, change in the direction of obtaining lasting peace has started to be achieved. This was uttered by the Chairman Japar. And then he mentioned that we will be steadfast in attaining and accomplishing the path to peace. And then, nabanggit din kanina ni Ma'am Coronel Ferrer, yung continuity of peace. Narinig ko rin nung dumating ang dati kong boss si Jel Bernardo, is mentioning certain peace. Di ba, sir? I think this will be all realized. Pinakita rin kanina yung how the normalization process is being carried. And then the AP and PNP are part of the JNC, as explained by Ma'am Ferrer. And then will help in achieving to attain the normalization as the roadmap to peace. And AFP will be professional in attaining and doing its mandate to support that this process will be achieved, or this peace will be achieved. And then I think yun lang yung mga salient points that I have noted, yung distinguished speakers natin kanina, which has delivered. And again, I'm thanking the organizer for giving me this opportunity kahit kinakabahan ako for sharing my thoughts and reaction based on what our distinguished speakers have delivered before. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat and magandang hapon po.
Thank you, Colonel Greg Almerol. And now, for the reactors from the religious sector, I would like to call the President for Peace Advocates Zamboanga, Father Angel Calvo, CMF.
Special greetings to the main speakers today, Vice Chair, MILF Vice Chair Gatsali Jafar, and our very own Chief Negotiator, Miriam Coronel Ferrer, Father Joel Tabora, and the President of Ateneo de Davao, and all the sectors participating in this forum today. I would like to mention especially the local chapter of Bantay Bayanihan, who organized this forum, and who invited me. I find out that when I saw the program, my name appeared under the religious sector. I am not sure I can represent and less to speak on behalf of the religious sectors in Mindanao. My reaction to this forum today comes mainly as a collective response to the realities and the facts that we are living in the land of Mindanao today, coming mainly from a group composed of members from the different religious traditions in a particular region. I am very conscious about the region in which we are rooted, which is Samba Sulta, the areas of the island provinces. I'm very glad to see some representatives of the MILF here, but I miss some representation from Basilan, for instance, and the region of Western Mindanao. The signing of the framework agreement and most recently the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro, for us represent a very significant moment in the history of our country, and very specifically in the history of our Mindanao. For those who still remember, and those who have been witnessing the conflict in our land for the past 4 decades, as Father Joel Tabora has reminded us all today in the history of Mindanao, this agreement means a very successful moment in that continuous struggle for justice, as we have been reminded by the Cardinal Quevedo, and that dream of building a homeland. We have seen this as a great opportunity for peace, for a homeland in Mindanao. As somebody recently put it, maybe this is the last chance for a peaceful settlement. At the same time, we see many loose threads that need to be managed and woven well if we want to weave that tapestry of peace and homeland in our land of Mindanao. And that is the reason for us to express as civil society and interreligious leaders some concerns, some maybe apprehensions and the fears that we perceive in the communities as we try to accompany them into that dream of peace in Mindanao. Very especially after the happenings in our city, in Zamboanga City. We cannot avoid the reality, the recent reality that we are experiencing yet. We are not sure yet of the reasons of the group who came to Zamboanga, the real reason behind that event. We cannot call it siege, conflict, whatever you call it, but the fact that the MNLF confrontation has been the rude wake-up call for many of us. Peace advocates for many years, and the populace in general in that region. And the lessons to be learned from that experience is still not very clear after months that we have to deal with rehabilitation and thousands of internally displaced people who are suffering in the land. But one thing is clear, though. If that reaction was ignited by the preparation of the comprehensive agreement, the lesson to be learned and solutions to be applied should integrally involve the overarching peace accord. The whole peace accord will be learned from that lesson if we want to build the homeland, the real Bangsamoro, even as we are waiting for the presentation of the Bangsamoro Basic Law that Professor Ferrer says it's coming very soon. And to be into the lion's den of Congress that we have to undergo. Against this unfolding process and situation, I here present two main concerns that becomes challenges as we continue the process that belongs to many players now, not only to the main panels from the government and the MILF, that belongs to many players, to mention the Congress, the Supreme Court, the political leaders, the revolutionary groups still in the region, and the religious leaders, and to everybody are supposed to be players in that process. As I said, I would like to bring two main concerns. Number one, the question of inclusivity. I'm glad that Professor Ferrer mentioned this also. the question of inclusivity in the comprehensive agreement in Sambasulta, one cannot see the euphoria that mentioned by some news, I don't know, coming from, after the signing of the agreement, received with much euphoria in Mindanao. Honestly, we have not seen the euphoria in our communities, in our region. Very timid demonstrations, and even recently asking for the passing of the basic law. In some areas, as you know, it was forbidden, the rally. But the very timid demonstrations in that, definitely not very euphoric. At this point in time, the accord should visibly be owned by all tribes and sectors of the core areas that the annexes have assigned. But that is not, there is not there at all. I cannot see the euphoria. Indeed, even for Zamboanga City, our group of peace advocacy had been urging the adversarial populace to throw their constructive support behind the deal, even if the city may never become a territorial part of the Bangsamoro region. But Zamboanga, we feel, is a very important part of Mindanao, not only for its historical place and historical record, but being so closely dependent on and from the Moro territories, besides the presence of more than 300,000 Muslim residents, more Muslim residents in Zamboanga City than in the whole province of Basilan. In fact, Zamboanga, it is culturally speaking a part of the core territory. The city's refusal to be involved will only depend or deepen communal divisions and foment more violence in the future. That is why now the campaign in Zamboanga, if you go to Zamboanga, you see tarpaulins all around with "No te vayas de Zamboanga." That is the campaign. No te vayas de Zamboanga. Don't you go far from Zamboanga. Don't leave Zamboanga. Like the proverbial rats abandoning a sinking ship, more and more Zamboangueños, from plain residents to businessmen, are leaving Zamboanga for safer places elsewhere. This translates into the challenge to the agreement on the matter of inclusivity. It should, by itself and by the basic law and its later intervention, such as the campaigns leading to the plebiscite, be able to convince more of the skeptical, if not hostile, constituents in Sambasulta that the accord will promote their socio-economic interests, and especially that sense of cultural identity of being Bangsamoro. I would say now that it is ironic that for Miswari to reject now the agreement of Bangsamoro when he was the one who popularized really coined the term Bangsamoro. It has been developed over the struggle of the Mujahideen, of the MNLF and the MILF. This means to achieve those ends are basically contained in the agreement annexes. What then is needed is more effort to dialogue with the grassroots about the deal and its promises and prospects. On this score, no amount of dialogues with the communities will be enough to programmatically lay the groundworks for the moment of truth, when the plebiscite and the elections will take place. Over and above these dialogues, as the constituents begin to embrace the accord, they must be provided with opportunities to concretize in their own effort participation in governance and also participation in security. Peace conditions in their communities through collective socioeconomic projects that will uplift their lives over and above the accords and its legal and political prescription. To get all of them on board the crucial challenge of inclusivity, which translates into ownership of the peace settlement, must beforehand be clarified and communicated to all the stakeholders, political leaders, religious leaders, even members of the Sultanate, and other ideological groups, Yakans, Tausug, Sama, Badjao, and even the settlers. Second is the urgency and indispensability of security in the context of human security, particularly protection from the deadly violence within the context of human rights. The reality of armed threats in Sambasulta is somewhat more complicated and more serious than anywhere else in Mindanao, I dare to say, because of the presence of private armies, terrorist groups and bandits, lost commands, pirates and renegade groups. How will the normalization component of the CAB address and neutralize these threats? To the extent that the MILF, as a principle of the process themselves, will achieve a level of security that will encourage them to fully decommission their weapons. We know that the normalization annex is excellent to the extent that it spells out the process and means of decommissioning, the social retribution and justice for those who need them, and the establishment of internal security apparatuses. But who holds the levels of these mechanisms? Who controls the management of the many armed groups operating in the area? How extensive is their operational scope and effectivity? How can, for example, the MNLF, who continue to hold on to their weapons and camps, be also decommissioned under this accord? How can political warlords be made to dismantle their private armies and still be assured of protection from their enemies and rivals? Another issue of security is the human rights of the indigenous people. Most especially, I would like to mention the group of Sama Badjaos, who have been claiming for their ancestral domain in the coastal areas. Resolving such questions and concerns is crucial for the building of the envisioned Bangsamoro government and region. It will enable non-Bangsamoro neighboring areas like Zamboanga City to more confidently be involved, to play a constructive role that will redound to their own human and communal security. Ever since the MNLF siege, Zamboanga City has continuously been under the highest level of security alert. The siege has deepened internal conflict, distrust, and discrimination between and among residents belonging to different cultural communities. Furthermore, while the city is mainly free of traditional armed threat groups, it is hemmed in by the presence of these threats located to its north and south. This situation leads to a sense of paranoia among city residents, and a syndrome that impacts negatively on the peace process because it engenders dysfunctional relationships and behaviors. Given these views and consideration, we, again, as I represent this group of peace advocates in the area, in the region, would like to continue supporting deeply the agreement and hopes to expand such support, particularly through its intercultural dialogue and activities, to harness the inherent power of religious and cultural values and beliefs, to demystify all the misconceptions and fears about Islamization related to the new accord. Through this, we aim to weave into a beautiful, well-designed tapestry of justice and change out of the many loose threads of peace in Mindanao. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Calvo. And the next reactor from the religious sector is the Secretary General of National Ulama Conference of the Philippines. He is Professor Ali S. Ayub. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most compassionate, allow me to greet you. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon us all. I cannot mention one by one. Sorry. How many minutes? How much time? 5 minutes. This is my reaction to the program. Each speaker should be given time so that we will be conscious. Sorry. Of course, I was informed that I have to prepare the perspective of the religious. I'm not here to speak the entire religious community of Muslims, but I can bring you also the issues and concerns from the ground, and my personal view in reaction or rejoinder to the messages of the two speakers. First, I would like to, Father Joel mentioned about deepest consensus quest for homeland, a land that we can call home. This is a very strong statement. It needs collective efforts. All of us should be the one to build that home. Not only the MILF and the government, all of us. And I salute Father Joel. I think this is one of the appreciation from the Christian community transcending religious identity and ethnic identity. I think this is also, I can say, the scholars from Europe and United States, the free thinkers, the free writers, they tell the truth. And I think Father Joel just mentioned the truth a while ago. Palakpakan natin si Father Joel. And also, in organizing this forum. Now, Vice Chair Jaffer mentioned about righteous, God-fearing governance. We do appreciate this concept, but we have to be careful when we talk about God-fearing. It should be God-fearing in terms of institutionalizing good governance, accountability, and transparency. Not cutting off hands, the Sharia, so-called Sharia in the Middle East. If you remember, pwedeng tubig. United States, 2 years ago, or a long time ago, or after the September 11, they released a list of terrorist organizations. And in that list, they include the MILF. Did you remember? The MILF reacted right away and even wrote a letter to United States, to US Congress, telling them, we are not terrorist group, we are revolutionary movement. And telling the US that you are part of the problem. Please come, solve the problem, help us. And I think Father Calvo here is also part of the problem. Historically, I'm talking about the Spaniards. Father Calvo is a Spaniard. Of course, he also very clear in terms of stand about the colonization. So I think this is very clear when we talk about righteous, God-fearing governance. It's about infusing values, Islamic values, to governance. Because we need, in this country, that values. Even if we have perfect structure, mechanism, but the human factor is very important. You and God, and that's self-regulatory. Now, Professor Ferrer mentioned about asking people, and then the people reacted, how sure are you that this time will be the solution? I think we need to have paradigm shift. When I say paradigm shift, we don't see that the solution should be given by the MI and the government. We should be the one to give also our own solution. We should be the part in building that kind of society. Thank you, Brother Moose. I'm trembling, just like the officer from the military. Just tell me, because if I start talking, 5 minutes is not enough for me. But I'm very sure I'll give you time to react for the open forum. I think Professor Ferrer mentioned about the template. We have the template. And putting the content in that template, it's all of us duty. It's the duty of all of us. It's not only one sector, but multi-sector should be involved. We have the template, and we are very sure that the template, I'm talking about the framework agreement and the comprehensive agreement, and we will have the basic law. And I think the sense of ownership should not be given only to the two parties, to the government and the MI, but all of us should be stakeholders. The academe is very clear, explaining to the people, Father Joel, and I think the religious, Father Calvo, the peace advocates in Bongo, very active, even the mayor. I don't have to say more about that. Okay, the template is very important. It should be inclusive, and it's very clear. You have there the inclusivity in terms of the contents, and also ending the patronage, dependency. And we can see in the fiscal autonomy, the clear sharing, not only the wealth, but also the power. And mind you, fiscal autonomy is very important. Even if you have all the powers on this earth, like the American, they say, give them all the political powers, but control their stomach. They will bow to you. I agree to that. So this fiscal autonomy is very important. Because if you see the arm now, the huge chunk of money is being used for salaries of the employees. They cannot, create investments, create wealth, because there are no program funds. And there are no, in terms of investments. Mindanao is very rich. That's why you see foreigners coming in. Why? Because of the resources in Mindanao. We need to have partnership with foreign investors. But we have to start from our own. We need to have our own capital to start investments, because foreigners will not come if we are not stable in terms of investments. And we have many resources. But we need to invest not only the natural resources, but the human resource. I think this is the challenge of the government and the MILF, the human resource. Because we talk about poverty, talk about normalization, it's connected. We cannot just arrest Abu Sayyaf in Sulu. You cannot just arrest criminals. Because researchers tell us most of the criminalities in the world because of poverty. If you go to Sulu, if you ask this young Abu Sayyaf, they would tell you, wala silang trabaho, wala silang education. So I think this is the approach comprehensively. We need to have, comprehensive plan in, we talk about normalization, not just arresting, not just killing, but I think long-range plan in terms of eradicating terrorism in our country. And I think even Americans, United States, have learned the lessons not to terrorize the terrorists, but changing the mind and the status of the terrorist. I'm talking about education and livelihood. And we are very thankful. I think foreign countries are coming in to help us. I'm talking about European Union, Western countries, and even in Asia, we have Japan, the JICA. And we have learned that JICA entered into memorandum of agreement with the Bangsamoro Transition Commission to capacitate the Bangsamoro in terms of governance. I think this is the failure of the previous. They have, appointed people in governance who are not qualified. So what happened? I think that's part of the problem. So now the government is very careful, and even MILF, that they need to put the correct structure, the correct mechanism, and the correct people to govern. I think this is the challenge for us. We need to build that. There are 3 areas that we need to concentrate. I'm talking about long-range engagement. 1 is building the institution. 2 is the human resource. And 3, enabling environment. We need these 3 components. We cannot separate one from the other. So we need to build those institutions, those communities, enabling environment, and to have human resource responsive to the peace and development of our country. Later, we can engage the international community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ayub. Now, on the part of the civil society, I would like to call the Executive Director of Mindanao Coalition of Development NGO Networks, or MINCODE, by Raisa May Anayatin.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum. May peace be with you. Good afternoon. Kung si Colonel Almerol po at si Professor Ayub kinabahan, so parang okay na rin, nakabahan ako. Ako po si Bay, isa po akong Moro, isang Bangsamoro, isang Maguindanon po, galing sa Dulawan. Ang Dulawan po ay tinatawag na ngayong Datupiang, munisipyo ng Maguindanao. Ang Dulawan po noon ay sentro ng trade and commerce sa buong, hindi pa tinatawag ni Mindanao noon, pero siya po ay sentro ng trade and commerce. Pero ngayon po, after several decades, ito na po ay one of the poorest municipalities in the Philippines. Kaya po siguro nag-decide ang family to move from Cotabato City to General Santos City at nagkaroon po ng opportunity na makakuha ng magandang edukasyon sa Ateneo de Davao University. Pero kasabay po nun, yun po, yung responsibilidad at yung social responsibility at yung kaakibat na parang may sense of na naiwan yung aking mga relatives, mga childhood friends, naiwan sila sa isang area na madalas ay tinatawag na conflict affected area. At yun po kaya malapit sa puso ko ang usapin ng Bangsamoro at ng peace process. Kaya po nagpapasalamat ako sa organizer, sa Ateneo de Davao at sa Alcalam sa pag-conduct ng isang Multi-Stakeholder Forum na ito. Thank you for this opportunity that we are gathered, that we are having our dialogue, that we come together to listen and to share. Dahil po tayo po ay nanggaling sa iba't ibang backgrounds, iba't ibang institutions, iba't ibang mandates. At sa ngayon po, ang dinadala ko, sabi dito sa programa, ay dalhin ko daw po ang boses ng civil society organizations. So in behalf po sa 12 member networks ng MinCode at sa more than 500 na NGOs, people's organizations, and cooperatives in Mindanao, kami po sa MinCode, we would like to commend both the GPH and the MILF panels for the historic signing of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. And on a personal note, nais kong magpasalamat sa women behind the panels and the committees and the technical working groups. Women and young women at that. So maraming salamat. And just as we commend, we would like to express our commitment to continue to move this peace process forward. The CSO community is with you not only during moments of celebration, but also in times of great challenges. Since the signing of the framework agreement on the Bangsamoro, several consultations were conducted on the ground to raise awareness on Mindanao history and the story of the Bangsamoro and indigenous peoples in Moro areas, outside of Moro areas, in key cities and regions of Mindanao, and also even at the national level. We shall stand with you as we work for the smooth passage of the Bangsamoro Basic Law, and more importantly, for the peaceful transition from ARMM to the Bangsamoro. And with that, we have some points lang for the panels to consider and for us as stakeholders in this peace process. Number one, that we should look beyond 2016. Yung roadmap po klaro hanggang 2016. So sana ready din tayo that after 2016, maganda at maayos po ang pamamalakad sa ating Bangsamoro. And also to keep in mind as we move along as we read along the documents and prepare the documents and sign the several annexes and attachments, we should keep in mind the changes that we want to see, because these documents are not only pieces of paper, but they are an implication, and they entail that the changes affect ordinary people. Ordinary women, young people, farmers, fisher folks, government employees, Moros and indigenous peoples, and other basic sectors and institutions, both in the Bangsamoro areas and even in Mindanao and even the whole country. Yun po, and then we would like to hope also that the institutions created already by the comprehensive agreement are open, transparent, and accountable. Yung sinasabi po ni Father Tabora kanina that there is a need to build consensus on the ground. Dun po makakatulong kami as partners. Kami po sa civil society ay pwede po ninyong ituring na partners in the peace process. And lastly, on a more personal note, ito po ay panawagan sa lahat natin, tulad ng sinabi ni Professor Ayub, lahat tayo may stake, lahat tayo may investment dito sa peace process na to. Whether or not you belong or you are part of the core territory of the Bangsamoro, because the Bangsamoro issue is a national issue. So yun po, I would like to call on all stakeholders, the military, the academe, the law enforcers, people's organizations and cooperatives, and other non-government organizations, and even the government, that as we move, as we make our stand, as we engage in the peace process, please pakiusap po, please keep in mind please think of us, the young Moro, the young Mindanaoans, the successor generation. Isa lang po simple, sana simple, yung hope ko, that in the next 20 years, sana po hindi na po namin kailangang pag-usapan kung paano magkakaroon ng peace. Sana po in the next 20 years, hindi na po namin kailangang mag-conduct ng Multi-Stakeholders Forum para maintindihan ang isang agreement on peace. Kundi, inshallah, God willing, we live peace. That peace is not only a concept or an aspiration, but is experienced in our daily life. Yun lang po, sukran wa salam.
Thank you, Bay Raisa. And to the last reactor from the academe, he is the director of Al-Kalam Institute for Islamic Identities and Dialogue in Southeast Asia of Ateneo de Davao University. He is none other than Dato Mussolini Sinsuat Lidasan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuhu. Peace and peace for each and every one of us. The Philippine government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or MILF, signed the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro last March 27, 2014 at the Malacanang Palace. This agreement seeks to end the armed conflict in southern Mindanao. The biggest task lies ahead after the symbolic signing. We believe that a greater jihad begins, as what Father Joel mentioned. The task of peace building and reconciliation among the diverse peoples of Mindanao require the cooperation of every stakeholders of Mindanao. The Ateneo de Davao University, through its Al-Kalam Institute, believes that working together with the different ethno-linguistic groups, civil society organizations, and with the active participation of the academe, people within the Bangsamoro will not be left behind. We recognize that the Bangsamoro peoples are not homogeneous and not a monolithic entity. As part of the academe, we will help in the following points. First, we will continue intra-faith and interfaith dialogue. As mentioned by Professor Ali kanina, even Islam itself is very much diverse. Thus, we need not only interfaith, but we need intra-faith among Muslims. Second, we need to provide space for everyone to voice out their concerns and issues. In the past few months, we've been partnering with Forum ZFD, Bread for the Word, and the Al-Kalam and the Ateneo for the series of Peace Lens. Peace Lens is a pakikinabi wherein we discuss the different annexes objectively without putting our own biases into the discussion. Third, we need to conduct robust research. As we mentioned kanina, the history of Mindanao is so diverse also, and even our government, the Philippine Republic, has so many symbolism that does not represent the Bangsamoro people or the Muslims in Mindanao. When we look at our flag, we only see 8 rays that symbolizes those provinces that fought the colonizers. But what about Mindanao? What about our ancestors who fought the Americans and the Spaniards? Fourth, we need to promote social justice in our communities. And lastly, we need to capacitate the people within the Bangsamoro to ensure that institutions and mechanisms for an effective democratic process will work. Alam po natin na once nandiyan na yung political entity, there would be a new ball game. Hopefully it will level the playing field, but it will adopt political parties that will represent the people, that will represent the MILF, the MNLF, even the traditional leaders, the royalties, and all other sectors. And how can an ordinary Moro, an ordinary citizen, be able to participate if he himself does not know how democracy works? So thus, it is the task of the academe, the schools, to ensure that all of us knows what's happening in Mindanao and knows how the system will work. Lastly, as Father Joel mentioned, Bangsamoro is a work in progress. Father Joel and most of my colleagues, my friends, know how much I problematize Bangsamoro. But now I am one with them in helping Bangsamoro work. I would like to see a Bangsamoro, new Bangsamoro, not the Bangsamoro that Ms. Wari or the other groups tries to espouse. We want a new Bangsamoro that will represent each and every one of us. And we are here to help. Thank you, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dato Mus. So just like what I said a while ago, we have more than 60 organizations present. So I would like to recognize the others. So we also have from the OPAP, also from the International Monitoring Team, from the PBCI, from the IDIS, from Sunstar. We also have from Jose Segovia Foundation, from Holy Cross of Davao College, from the Mindanaoan, from CBCS, from MSU IIT, from the Department of Justice, from the Indonesian Consulate, from Oxfam, from OPA, from Davao JC Senate, from We Act 1325, from MASPEC, from the National Commission of Indigenous Peoples, of the Davao del Sur office. We also have from SIM Card Incorporated. We also have from the BPI arm. We also have from DAX, or Davao Association of Catholic Schools. We also have from Davao, from DSWD. We also have from Mindanews, from MPA, PGO. And also we have from the Commission on Human Rights, from the Learning Pathways, from the City Hall of Davao, from the JICA. We also have from the Save Davao Shrine Hills, from STCPD, from IPAC, of DMSF. And I think that will be all. If ever there are others who were not recognized, we will check the list. So due to the time constraints, we will proceed with the open forum. So we will just, hold on, sir. We will prepare first the stage for our panels. Yeah, I think we also have from the ICST, from AMPC, from the BJMP, and from GITIB. And for the open forum, I would like to request in my left Vice Chair, Ghazali Jafar, and also Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer to please come on stage and for the open forum. So I would like to announce the rules of the open forum. So if you would like to ask a question, you should state your name, your organization, and then state the question directly. And then, of course, you also have to tell us to whom do you address the question. I would like to request Raisa and Haji to take your post. Raisa, please. The microphone. Okay, I think we are ready. Now for Raisa, Raisa will be entertaining those who would like to ask questions from this side. Now Haji will entertain the questions from this side. Okay? All right. So we are now open for questions. This one, Haji. Yes. You can use the microphone here. He will just.
So you have.
Before I ask my direct question to Professor Ferrer,
Sir, your name, sir, and
I would like to introduce my name.
Yes. Okay.
That I am Hamid Lajakahal from the smallest province of the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, and the most peaceful one. The entire spectrum of this activity can only be summarized in one word, and that is justice. The justice that I am speaking about is now directly linked to the halls of Congress, the Senate, the halls of Congress, and even the Supreme Court. This is on the basis of past experience, because there are divergent views that are being stated by senators, congressmen, and even members of the Supreme Court. Just last week, I read a statement from the PERCONSA, from the President of the Philippine Constitutional Association, stating the fact regarding the relationship between the national government and the would-be Bangsamoro government, which is stated in asymmetric relationship. They were saying that how can there be two governments, one in the national and one in the regional? The other thing is, with regards to the ministerial form of government, while we are under a presidential form, how can we create? These are questions that is on top in Congress and other society. How can we establish a ministerial form of government under a presidential system of government? I would like to address these comments or questions to Professor Ferrer.
Professor Ferrer.
Salamat po dun sa tanong. You know that the form of government for the ministerial, the Bangsamoro was one of the very early consensus forms. We signed that part way back in April 2012, which means that it has gone through all the due diligence that was necessary for government to sign on. And ito po yung nangyari dyan sa discussion natin sa Presidente. Dati chair pa, si Chair Martin Clono, na yan, associate president. Sabi niya, sir, gusto po niya na ministerial government, parliamentary system. Ang sabi ng President, kung may merits doon, is that possible with the Constitution? And we did our research. We did our work. And what aspect of the Constitution are we touching on? So the anchor, to allow a different structure of government for the autonomous region stipulated in the Constitution. It is the statement that says that the structure of government in the autonomous region shall be in the Organic Act. And that Organic Act is the future Bangsamoro basic law. So hindi sinabi sa Constitution na dapat ang structure ng government ng autonomous region ay kapareho ng pang local governments. In fact, tututusin po, look at the Constitution, under Article 10 of local governments, local government code could provide for some other structure of government in the local governments. But local government code is somewhat conservative in basically adopting the usual format. Pinasalanan natin, usual government, vice government, executive, tapos executive, and the local government. Now we have this new idea that which we appreciate dahil na nabanggit kanina, pinalawag the presentation, at present, dun sa dahil sinasabi mismo sa Constitution, ay yung organic act is one basic structure of government. Isa lang ang important that the executive and the legislature shall be elected. At sa isang pinamampunta ng basis ko na ilaw kong salita asymmetrical sa political term. Sa political science, this 1960, mas niya, mas magaling pa ito. Ang ibig sa opinion, yung ating constitution, ay kilala na may local governments, pero ang local governments are two special places. Pagkira at mas Mindanao, sa dalawang lugar na ito, sabi sila, hindi magkaroon ng autonomous region. So, kakaiba. Kakaiba yun sa situation sa ibang local governments. So, that sense that it's not symmetrical to the other regular local governments. Kasi may special establish siya. At yan ay nasa constitution. So, yun po, I think we can very well defend ourselves. But, ihari man ito sa Supreme Court at ito sa usapin ng constitutional mga bagay.
Thank you po. For the next question po, request lang po ng ating MILF Vice Chair, yung dalawang members po ng Central Committee to join him here on stage. Be Angkad and the Secretary. Yes. Yeah. Yes. See. And the Secretary of the Okay, so Haji.
We have a friend from the MSU-IIT.
My name is Giovanni Caballero of the Institute for Peace and Development in Mindanao of MSU-IIT. I also happen to be a co-convener of the Bantay Bayanihan in Lanao. My question goes to Professor Ferrer. In October 2013, the Bangsamoro Transition Commission asked the academe and the civil society organizations to help them carry out a series of public consultations, which was a necessary ingredient in the drafting of the Bangsamoro Basic Law. And true to our vocation as friends and helpers of the peace process, we did carry out the public consultations in Lanao, seeking the hopes and fears and ultimately the recommendations of the people from the grassroots communities. Now that a draft of the BBL has been submitted, we learned that the said draft cannot be made public yet until it reaches the Philippine Congress. We understand that there are legal and practical considerations in keeping the draft confidential at the moment, but you know, there in our communities, we are being asked by our constituents, how sure are we that our recommendations were factored into the Bangsamoro Basic Law draft? is there a way of knowing whether or not those recommendations were factored in before it reaches Congress for approval, disapproval, or revision? Ito po yung mga questions na hinaharap na namin doon na hindi namin masagot. And so we would like to ask for your wisdom. Could you advise us as to how the Friends of the Peace process should deal with the excitement or over-excitement or di kaya anxiety of the communities that we consulted vis-a-vis the Bangsamoro Basic Law Draft?
Ma'am Iye?
Simply, the short answer is that I do not know which of the provisions that I have seen in the draft BBL came from your group. And the best person to answer that will be the BTC members, especially Mr. Iqbal, who chairs the BTC. But I don't think that because the draft cannot be shown publicly, if there are specific inquiries such as that, it can still be answered. But I'm not in a position to answer because I don't know which ones came from your group. Pwede naman kasing i-discuss in general terms. Mahirap lang kasi pag yung lumabas, ito na nga, may ganitong mga provisions, and then later on, mag-generate yan ng maraming tanong. Alam naman natin that there are many interests that might be affected here. We understand, of course, for instance, the concern of the local governments, di ba? In terms of the relationship or the powers and structures between the Bangsamoro government and the local government. With regards to the transition from the ARM to the Bangsamoro government, there are concerns about what will happen to the bureaucracy, the civil servants, and all of that. So if these come out before, these are really clarified and consolidated together in the bill that will be carried by the sponsors of the bill in Congress, it might only generate that kind of animosity or insecurities that could have been avoided or may have been unnecessary. But the short answer is, please ask the members of the BTC because they will be in a better position. I think kung specific questions like that, there's no reason why this cannot be addressed verbally without need of having to make public very much sooner than is prudently advised. Yun. So maybe si Vice Chair Gatsali Jafar might have something to add there.
Halos pareho ang sagot ko sa sagot po ni Chair Ferrer. Una-una sapagkat ang proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law, ano na sa Malacanang, wala na sa poder ng Bangsamoro Transition Commission. At ang information namin nire-review sa Malacanang. At maliban dyan wala na pong may paliwanag sa doon na sagot.
Okay. Thank you. Raisa?
From the Davao JC Senate.
I am Bob Ginoo. I am the president of the Davao JC Senate. And this is one of our advocacy. I am not posing a question, but I am posing a suggestion wherein the board and would like to express a brief background lang kung before I say the suggestion, because in my induction sa Davao GC Senate, we have a Mindanao advocacy addressing the 4 major problems of Mindanao, which is peace and order, the issue on the Bangsamoro, environment, responsible mining, and yung power generation. So that's 4 major problems wherein we believe that one cannot exist without the other. If you want peace, you need to have development. So for us to be able to have peace and development, we have to address not only one problem, which is peace, but we need to address the other 3 major problems, which I have already stated. Addressing the problem on peace, we have invited the MNLF and the MILF in my induction to start with our negotiation with the peace process. That was in March. And we are now individually getting in touch with our Mindanao leaders on the MILF and the MNLF. And I invited the spokesperson of the MNLF and the person of Attorney Manny Fontanilla in this forum.
Sir, do you have a question to our panel?
Yeah, I'm getting to it. I am not making a question, I'm making a suggestion.
Maybe we can...
And he suggests, I will get to that. I am now going to that.
Okay.
He suggested that kung pwede, come up with a schedule wherein the MNLF, the OPAP, and the MILF can present their sides, probably a dialogue, and for them to be included in a dialogue with you, the MNLF, the MILF, and the government panel. So if Father Toboro can come up with a scheme on that or a schedule for that particular forum, probably before the presentation of Malacanang, yung kanilang framing of the Bangsamoro framework, probably we will be able to shortcut the problem and address the problem easily when you have already talked to them or you have more or less have a dialogue with them. Thank you.
So I guess that does not require the answer from the panel. Haji, you have a question there?
We have a friend from the law school.
Meron po
sorry,
yes,
the Vice
yes,
Chair.
Vice Chair.
Maraming salamat po doon sa suggestion. I cannot speak in behalf of the government. Pero ang pinapaliwanag ko dito ay sa panig ng MILF. Kami po sa leadership ng MILF, matagal na namin kinakausap ang mga leaders ng MILF. Many years already. Siguro mga 10 taon, around 10 years already. Noon meron kami mga meeting doon sa ating opisina. Anindarapanan. At ang pinakahuli yung pag-uusap namin ni Brother Jimmy Labawan, the Vice Chairman of MNLA. At I explained to him all what we want. At pinalawanag ko sa kanya na at this point in time, dumating kami sa puntos na dapat na mag-uusap. At napakalaga po ito. Alam po ninyo, nung si Brother Norm Miswari, ang chairman ng MNLA, ay na-release sa prison. With due respect to him. Siya po'y pumunta ng Davao City, nag-check-in sa isang hotel sa Davao City. Nag-decide kami sa Central Committee ng MILA na kausapin siya at dalawin siya bilang respeto sa kanya sapagkat kinikilala namin siya na isa sa maraming leaders ng mga Bangsamoro. Ako po yung nautusan, kumausap sa kanya. Ako'y pumunta sa Davao City. Kasama ko po yung isang membro ng Central Committee at may mga kasama kami. At nag-uusap kami. Ang akala po namin tuloy-tuloy na yun. Pero hindi po gano'n na nangyari. Yun lang siguro ang huling pagkipag-uusap namin sa kanya hanggang ngayon. At tungkol po sa pagkipag-uusap sa mga kapatid namin sa MNLA. At yung iba pang grupo, bukas po ang MILF. Anytime. At gusto po namin makipag-usap sa kanila ng tuwiran, direct, heart to heart. Pwede po nilang sabihin sa amin kung ano man yung gusto nilang sabihin. At pakikinggan po namin sila. Pakikinggan po namin ano man ang kanilang suggestions para sa kabubuti ng Bangsamoro people in general at lahat ng mamamayan ng Bangsamoro. At ito po ito. Maraming pong salamat.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Haji?
We have a friend from the Al-Sabar, an organization of Muslim law students.
Al-Sabar stands for Ateneo Law Association.
Assalamualaikum. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. My name is Faiza Cadon Tejero from Al-Sabar, the Ateneo Law Students Muslim Organization, and a representative of the Muslim youth. My question for Vice Chair, I'd like to humbly ask, sir, how do you intend to solve the differences between the MILF and the MNLF? How will we attain lasting peace when among the Muslim people in Mindanao we are divided? And my second question is, what are the measures to be implemented in the Bangsamoro which will prevent the evils that plague the ARMM, such as corruption and nepotism? Lastly, as a student of constitutional law for Professor Ferrer, ma'am, what can you say about Senator Miriam Santiago's statement that the agreement is unconstitutional for a couple of reasons? Among them is that the executive exceeded its powers and that the agreement does not bind the legislative and the judiciary. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maybe the Vice Chair would answer the first question.
Pasensya na po, pero ano po yung unang tanong? What's the first question?
The first question po is, how can you solve your differences with MNLF?
How do we solve
Yes. And then
the
number
problem?
Two, yes po. Your differences po with MNLF. And then number 2 question niya po sa inyo is, paano po ninyo ma-solve yung one of the biggest challenges po doon sa ARM, which is number 1 is corruption, and the other one is nepotism.
Kung tinutukoy yung problema doon sa ARM, wala po kaming kapangyarihan upang isolve yan. Pero probably this will answer all your questions. You see, when we talk about righteous governance, God-fearing governance, a governance which is responsible to the people and above all to God. We are not talking here about cutting hands or hudud, as we say in Islam, or kisas. Hindi po. At pabayaan po niyo ko mag-relate ng very short story. When we first conceptualized the organization of the MILA, many years ago, nanoon ang leader namin si Sheikh Salamat Hasim. Allahu yarhamu, ang unang chairman ng MILA. Kasama po doon ang pagbuo ng isang mga leaders, pagbuo ng leadership o mga leaders na nandoon sa kanila, sa kanilang mga puso, yung tinatawag na righteous at God-fearing. At in order to attain that objective, meron po isa sa 4 major program namin na Islamization. Ito po'y mahalaga. Sapagkat naniniwala po si Stats o Sheikh Salamat Hasim, pag nagtagumpay kami doon sa Islamization, by the way, ang process, ang scheme na Islamization na programa namin ay bawat leaders ng MILA kailangan magsikap upang ma-Islamize niya ang kanyang sarili. When I say Islamize, hindi lamang pray 5 times a day, fasting, at yung other pillars of Islam, but maganda yung pag-uugali, may respeto siya, at igagalang ng mga tao. At para mangyari yon, kailangan ma-Islamize yung bawat isang leader. Pag na-Islamize niya ang kaniyang sarili, sunod yung kanyang pamilya, immediate family members. Pagkatapos yung kanyang mga kapag-anak. Pagkatapos yung mga tao doon sa kanyang barangay. At pag nangyari yan, maaaring ang buong munisipyo ma-Islamize. And what is the significance of that? Pag na-Islamize ang isang tao, nandoon sa kanya ang dedication upang masilbihan niya yung mamamayan. Hindi siya mag-iisip na i-corrupt yung pera ng gobyerno. Aminin natin, ito ang isa sa problema natin. Matatakot siya sa drug sapagkat in Islam, drug is all haram. What is mean by haram? Forbidden. Haram ang paggawa ng drug, haram ang pag-transport nito, pag-marketing nito, haram ang paggamit. Everything is haram sa drug. At kung ang isang tao ay nandoon sa kanya ang God-fearing, kung siya God-fearing, kahit kung siya namuno sa isang bayan, laging yun ang kanyang magiging guide. Alam po ninyo, ang Mindanao, ang Bangsamoro homeland ay napakayaman. Lahat ng klase na mina nandyan sa aming lugar. Sa Bangsamoro, Tawi-Tawi, Sulu, Basilan, Maguindanao, Lanao, nandyan. Lahat ng mina nandyan. Ang wala lang sa amin uranium, yung sangkap ng bombang atomic bomb. Pero hindi na naman kailangan yun kasi hindi kami nagbabalak na gumawa nun. Ang coffee galing sa amin. Copra, corn. Pati na yung tuna fish na popular noon na galing General Santos. Pero yan galing sa Tawi-Tawi. Nakita ang mga brothers ko from Tawi-Tawi. And now we are planting oil palm. Pero kahit lahat ng kayamanan nasa atin, nasa aming lugar, kung yung mamumuno sa gobyerno, wala yung takot sa Allah, takot sa God, at saka hindi namumuno para sa mga tao, wala mangyayari. Ang Bangsamoro will remain poor forever. At palagi ko, ganyan ang nangyayari sa atin ngayon. So, pabayaan po ninyo, medyo kung mahiwalay man yung explanation ko sa tanong. But you know, in the past, many asked us kung tama ba yung kung minsan pinag-uusapan sa Pilipinas na dapat yamin yung konstitusyon ng Pilipinas o baguhin ang saligang batas ng Pilipinas. Sapagkat yan daw naging dahilan kung bakit ang Pilipinas ay nagiging ganito. Ako naniniwala kami na hindi dahil sa saligang batas ng Pilipinas ay hindi maganda. The Philippine Constitution is one of the best constitution in the world. Pero ang kailangan magbago, yung mga namumuno. At yan ay according to Islam. Kung hindi babaguhin ng tao, kung ano yung nasa puso niya, walang mangyayari, hindi magbabago. Yung pangalawang question, kung kailangan pa bang sagot yun yan? O nasagot na lahat?
Yung pangalawang tanong po yung sinagot niyo. Yung first question niya po is, how are you going to solve your differences with the MNLF? And considering po na even the Muslim community itself is divided po.
Paano namin
ma-solve po yung differences niyo ng MILF, ng differences niyo po with the MNLF? And then
Muslim community, the internal, you know, this is an internal problem. We admit, between the several groups, revolutionary groups, it appears that we are not united. No, We are not enemies. Hindi. Hindi kami nagbarilan with the MNLA. But ano itong nangyayari? You know, this is a difference of how we approach the problem, solution to the problem. It is incidental that, you know, MNLA, meron silang paniniwala to solve the problem of the Bangsamoro people. Kami naman sa MILA, meron kaming nakikita na tamang paraan upang ma-solve o ma-address yung Bangsamoro issue. That is why we agree to a negotiated political solution of the Bangsamoro issue. As stated by Brother Salamat Hasim before, negotiation is the best and most civilized way of resolving the Bangsamoro issue. At very firm ang paniniwala namin dyan. Maaari yung ibang grupo, iba yung kanilang paniniwala to approach the problem. At besides that, the MILF leadership is not interested about position. Ito, hindi namin tinatago. No. Our interest is to deliver the Bangsamoro government to the Bangsamoro people. Yun lamang. At sinasabi namin in public, kung nandyan ang Bangsamoro government, democratic naman ito. Meron eleksyon. Ibig sabihin, democratic yung pagpili ng mga leaders. Any qualified Bangsamoro or persons within the Bangsamoro territory can run for political election. If they will be elected to that position, they become leader of the Bangsamoro people. Ganon ang nasa sa puso namin at totoo ito sa amin. Hindi ito propaganda lamang. Up to this moment, walang niisa man mga membro ng Central Committee na nagsabi na gusto niya maging membro dyan sa proposed Bangsamoro Transition Authority to be appointed by the President. Wala. Ang focus namin ngayon, kung paano sana i-approve ng Congress yung Bangsamoro Basic Law. Sapagkat ito ang key. Kung wala itong proposed Bangsamoro Basic Law, walang Bangsamoro government. There is no Bangsamoro government. Ibig sabihin, walang gobyerno. Katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, will the Bangsamoro accept it? Tatanggapin kaya nila? Kung hindi, anong gagawin nila? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Miriam?
Tanong naman tungkol sa kay Senator Miriam, Defensor Santiago. Ang maganda talaga kung makapag-usap ng maayos kasi mas mabibigyan ng context and explanation. Ang problema lang talaga pag lumalabas yan sa media, pinipick up na hindi na napapaliwanag. So magandang mapaliwanag talaga ngayon yan. So salamat nun sa tanong. Halimbawa, yung sinasabi na what is the authority? Who is the government that signed this agreement? Well, the government, GPH, Government of the Philippines, which is represented by the highest office of the land, that is the office of the President. We know that we are a Republican system. We adopt yung separation of powers, and that the separation of powers is duly recognized in the roadmap. Kaya nga dadaan yan sa process where in fact, it will have to go to Congress for its own deliberation. Hindi siya madi-deliver by itself. Hindi dahil pinirmahan ng panel in behalf of the government panel in behalf of the office of the President ay mangyayari na yan. Meron talagang engagement, real engagement that will have to come into play between the executive branch and the legislature to make sure that yung effort ng presidente, nung sinasabi niya, nung nag-commit siya dito, deliver
what you commit to and commit only to what you can deliver. So that kind of commitment is something that the President will do with due respect to the powers of Congress. And that's very clear in the roadmap. Secondly, ay yung tanong, di ba, ano ba yung kapangyarihan ng Presidente na mag-enter into a peace agreement? Napaka-basic actually nung tanong eh. It's the power of the President as Commander-in-Chief. It's his responsibility, it's his duty to solve all the conflicts in this country. And the best way to solve that conflict as far as he is concerned, reflected in his policy, is through the peace negotiation. So ito po yung authority na dala-dala, yung authority ng President as Commander-in-Chief, as Chief Executive, to address the concerns, the well-being of his constituents. So malinaw po yun, that is very well within his powers. Hindi na siguro masyadong aandar yung argumento na yon na walang ganong klaseng mandato ang ating Presidente para magtayo ng isang peace panel at pumirma sa ganitong agreement sa isang grupo na kabahagi din ng Republika ng Pilipinas.
Thank you, Professor.
We have a LUMAD partner.
Haji, can we accommodate Raisa first? Raisa?
From the MILF delegation.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. Para kay Professor Pereira, ma'am, when I was in abroad, and during the visit of Sir Iqbal, I joined the gatherings there. May nagtanong, paano kung hindi ma-implement ang whatever signed agreement between the GPH and MILF, anong mangyayari? Tinanong si Sir Iqbal. He said, we signed the agreement with the government. We didn't sign the agreement with the administration. Represented by the administration, the Pinoy administration. So, it is a moral obligation of the government to implement whatever signed agreement between the GPH and MILF. Ang tanong ko po, anong kasiguraduhan ng kasalukuyang administration if ever happened na hindi ma-implement, fully implemented ang buong napagkasunduan sa time ng itong administrasyong Aquino? Ano ang kasiguraduhan na maipagpapatuloy ito ng susunod na administration? Salamat.
So, ano pong pangalan natin?
Adam Evarista.
Thank you.
Sige. Okay, totoo po yan, hindi lamang isang administrasyon ang involved dito. Pag ang isang administrasyon ay pumunta sa ganyang klaseng, pumirma sa ganyang klaseng kasunduan, dala-dala niya rin po yung susunod na administrasyon. Kung kaya't kami po, bagamat tinayo lamang ng administrasyon na to, kinilala natin lahat ng past agreements, signed agreements. At makikita natin yan doon sa Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro, doon sa ating introductory text kung saan linatag natin lahat ng mga major documents, nag-umpisa sa Ceasefire Agreement noong 1997, Tripoli Agreement on Peace noong 2001, na lahat yan ay nag-umpisa pa panahon ni Presidente Ramos, Presidente Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, at lahat yan ay kinikilala. Siyempre, yung MOAD, ibang kategorya yan kasi hindi po napirmahan. Diba? It's initialed but not signed. So yung ating officially na rin-recognize as part of all the agreements, the body of agreements are the signed documents. So administrations will have that kind of moral responsibility na ituloy-tuloy yan. Of course, presidents can have other policies, kamukha nung nangyari sa panahon ni Presidente Erap Estrada, kung saan ay hindi niya pinagpatuloy yung proseso at ang para sa kanya, ang mas mabuting approach ay yung all-out war noong nangyari na nga 2000, 1988, 99, 2000, no? Iba-ibang mga gera muli ang pumutok sa iba't ibang bahagi ng Mindanao. Pero yun po ay bagay na maari nga talagang singilin sa mga susunod na administrasyon. Pero ano yung pinaka-guarantee natin dito? Ang pinaka-guarantee talaga dito ay pag makita ng sino mang politiko na ito yung gusto ng tao. Kasi kung ito yung nakikita niya, malakas ang suporta ng tao dito, hindi siguro siya tatakbo sa 2016 election na ang kampanya niya ay ipawalang bisa. yung mga napagkasunduan. In fact, ang maaring marinig natin sa kanilang lahat ay ipagpapatuloy nila yan. Lalo pa kung nakikita nila na ito talaga yung makakabuti at ang tao ay naniniwala dito. So napakahalaga po na yung tao mismo ang kasama natin dito. Lahat ng tao sa iba't ibang sektor, iba't ibang bahagi ng Pilipinas.
Thank you, Professor Miriam. Haji?
We have a Lumad friend.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Datu Alan Joy Sumandang of the Supreme Tribal Council for Peace and Development. I am the Executive Secretary and at the same time Chairman on Committee on Investment and Legal Affairs of the Obu Manubu Tribe here in Davao City. Talking about the inclusivity, I would like to raise a little concern of whether there was a proper representation which supposed to include other IPs, because some of the Bangsamoro are also IPs, but there are IPs na hindi kasali sa Bangsamoro. In Mindanao, especially in the process of formulating this agreement. If there was, kasi hindi man namin alam, what were the qualifications, who are they, because according to Section 16 ng ating 8370 Republic Act 8371, nakalagay po dito that the IP has the right to participate in decision making, to participate fully. Nakalagay dito fully. So meaning to say lahat ng mga yung mga policy making dapat andoon yung mga other IPs. If they so choose at all levels of decision making in matters which may affect their rights, lives, and destinies through procedures determined by them, as well as maintain and develop their own indigenous political structures. So meron po dito po sa 8371, meron pong political structures ang indigenous people, yung indigenous cultural communities. So yun lang po ang tanong ko kung meron ba participation dito ang IP sa yung pag-formulate ng agreement. Thank you po.
Maraming salamat. Perhaps that question can be answered first by Professor Coronel.
Track 1 sa formal negotiations, kung matatandaan ninyo yung unang mga kasapi sa ating panel, si Mayor Piang, Ramon Piang ng UP, Maguindanao. So ito po yung isa sa dalawang munisipyo sa Maguindanao na ang majority ay mga Teduray. At napakalinaw na naging ugnayan din naman natin sa iba't ibang IP groups. Pagdating naman sa BTC, meron tayong government nominee na nagmula din dito sa Lumad sector, si Froilin Mendoza. So yun po, at meron din naman mga kasapi tulad ni Timoy Mulan na ninominate ang MILF na umupo din dito sa Bangsamoro Transition Commission. At sa ilang mga ginawang pagpupulong sa Kuala Lumpur, meron tayong mga inimbitahan tulad po ng samahan ng mga Badyaw. Nakarating po sila dun sa ating isang pagpupulong kung saan meron tayong pinirmahan na isang dokumento at talagang tuwang-tuwa din sila dun sa nakita nilang proseso. I think that was January. Yung last yata yun kasama po yung Council of the Badyaw and Sama. May mga kintawan silang nakadalo dito. Yun po yung sa formal process. Doon sa ibang proseso, yung through civil society organization interface during the different consultations.
Vice Chair?
With regards to the questions of the IPs, it is very, very clear that since the very beginning, with respect to the MILF Central Committee, they have already chosen to represent, and they've given the full blanket authority to that representative of the panels representing the IP in the person of Attorney Kino. He maintained his membership in the panel since the very beginning, up to this point in time. And as I repeat saying, the MILF Central Committee had given the blanket authority to the to Attorney Kinok to represent the IPs, where the Central Committee also had given also the authority to the representative of the IPs in the MILF panel to engage and consult all the IPs in the Bangsamoro, especially in the proposed territory of the Bangsamoro. This is as far as the MILF is concerned. And we also know very well that since the creations of the BTC in matters of formulating or writing or drafting the Bangsamoro Basic Law, we know very well that the BTC, both recommended by the GPH and the MILF, have joined together to come up with a clear consultations with the IPs, not only one tribe of the IPs, but they tried their very best to come up with a draft that is fully in consultations with the existing IPs, especially in the proposed territory of the Bangsamoro. That is as far as we know. And that is as far as how the government of the Philippines and the MILF comply with the so-called inclusivity of the agreements to come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Anker. Can you give some supplement, Brother Ronnie? Dagdag doon, laging pinahahalaga namin yan. Yung representation ng Brother, ang tawag namin yan, the IPs. Ang tawag namin dyan ni non-Islamized Bangsamoro. Pero alam namin na yung ibang mga kapatid na non-Islamized, binigyan ng agreement ng freedom of choice. Pero kahit na in the past, when I was the first chairman of the first MLL Peace Panel, maalala ko nandoon yung isang dato from Kidapawan. Brother Ronnie? From Kidapawan. Then, sumunod sa kanya si Engineer tayo ba pangalan? Engineer Adamat. Roger Adamat. Ngayon, si Engineer, si Tony, Dato Tony, Dato Antonio Kinok, ang nandyan sa peace panel ng MILF. Hindi lamang yung non-Islamized Bangsamoro ang binigyan namin pagkakataon. Noon, kasama si the late Judge Alan of Iligan. Di ba? Alan Flores. Flores. Membro ng panel namin. So, ginagawa namin ng alam namin na responsibility namin. Yun po ang sa abot po ng aming kayang gawin sa alam. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Let me add a little. When in fact, up to this present, ang policy po ng MILF, one of its operational policy is consultative. And up to this present, bukas po ang lahat ng pintuan ng MILF para po makipagkonsulta sa mga IPs. At lalong bukas po sila ngayon sa mga dialogo sa IPs. Ito po ang pangunahin ngayong ginagawa ng MILF ay patungkol sa consultations. Sa mga panahon na ito, hindi na po mabilang ang pumupunta ng darapanan ng mga IPs. And so with the IPs in Davao, you are very, very welcome to have a dialogue with the leadership of the MILF Central Committee as we welcome everybody in the darapanan as well.
Thank you, sir. It's already 5 o'clock, and we really apologize if we could not accommodate all your questions today. we are hoping that there will be another venue for your questions.
The privilege of the organizer, being the an organizer, we would wish to ask, because the Bantay Bayanihan has been part of the creating dialogue spaces, particularly on policy, on facilitating the Independent Commission on Policing. So we would wish to hear how the Bangsamoro will have their own police, if ever they are going to have their own police, because we facilitated in the dialogue spaces sessions with the ICP. Ma'am Coronel, please.
Yung pag-transform ng Bangsamoro government, kabahagi nga doon yung pagkakaroon ng isang police force, yung pinaliwanag kanina nung nagsalita mula sa kapulisan, yun nga, nakalagay sa Constitution. So yung sa ICP recommendation, ang very clear na doon ay it will be a police force for the Bangsamoro. May special relationship siya with the assembly. May oversight ang assembly sa kanya. Pero itong Bangsamoro police force na yan ay kabahagi pa rin ng Philippine National Police. So maari tayong magkaroon ng mga programa para ma-encourage yung pagpasok dito sa police force na to. Maari magkaroon ng mga special training at iba pa. At saka iba pang mga paghahanda para sa pagre-reconstitute ng mangyayaring police force for the Bangsamoro coming from the police regional, the PRO-ARM, which is the regional body now of the PNP in the ARM. So all of these details, kasama po yan. Later on, we will be able to show all of this more clearly, ano yung relationship ng Bangsamoro Police Force with the Bangsamoro Assembly or Parliament, ano yung relationship niya with the Chief Minister, ano yung relationship niya with the local governments, ano yung relationship niya with the NAPOLCOM, which is the National Police Commission, and so on. So marami pong mga ganong klaseng schema na pinoprovide yung report ng Independent Commission on Policing. So maganda po ang kanilang mga proposals. Inaasahan natin na itataguyod to ng lahat.
Thank you, Professor Coronel Ferrer. So again, we would like to apologize if we could not accommodate all your questions. So we hope that you can find another venue for those questions. So now let's proceed to the awarding of certificates for our keynote speakers. I would like to request Reverend Father Joel Tabora, Dr. Gail Ilagan, and Datu Musli Dasan to award the certificates and tokens for our keynote speakers for today. After that will be the closing remarks from the representative of Davao City Mayor. Ateneo de Davao University awards this Certificate of Appreciation to Honorable Ghazali Jafar for sharing his invaluable knowledge as keynote speaker during the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro Multi-Stakeholders Forum on May 17, 2014, held at Ateneo de Davao University. Given this 17th day of May 2014 at Finster Auditorium, Ateneo de Davao University, signed by Father Joel Itabora, SJ, President. Also, the same certificate of appreciation is awarded to Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer. That is for Vice Chair.
For Vice Chair.
Again, another round of applause for Professor Ferrer and Vice Chairman Jafar. And to give the to close our program today, I would like to call the Davao City District 3 Councilor, Honorable Rene Elias C. Lopez.
Father Joel Tabora, to our distinguished keynote speakers and our distinguished panel of speakers for this afternoon, to everyone here present, good afternoon. Just like Colonel Almirol, I am overwhelmed. I am awed and overwhelmed by the immensity, the enormity, and the significance of what we are doing this afternoon. Because all what we have been talking about the entire afternoon will spell the difference whether or not the efforts of so many will be either successful or, if not, a great big failure. Now, before everything, I wish to thank the organizers of this Multi-Stakeholders Forum, the Bantay Bayanihan Davao Convenor, headed by Gail Tan Ilagan, Dr. Gail Tan Ilagan. Congratulations, ma'am. Thank you very much for organizing this. Palakpakan po natin. Of course, our from the Ateneo de Davao University, Father Tabora, for hosting us all. Big palakpakan po natin lahat. And also to everyone here, your presence truly makes this forum very important because of your presence. The whole afternoon we've been talking about how to make things work, how to make peace work with this current comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. For every speaker that I was listening to, every word that they were saying, I was thinking to myself, will these things all work at the present time? We already have the pathways that our negotiators, our key negotiators, the peace panel negotiators, and the MILF has chartered for us. Now, they're trying their best to talk to us, to make this thing work. And that is the reason why we are all here this afternoon, to ask that very same question, will this work for us? To my mind, for every bit of idea, word, or sentence, or concept that has been presented in this afternoon, there is always, I could feel this underlying sense of nationalism in everyone. Because in the end, what matters most is that we are all Filipinos. We might call ourselves a different entity by any other name, whether it be religious or non-religious, IPs or what, business or commercial or whatever group that you may want to be called to. But in the end, it will be our sense of nationalism which is important in what we are doing now. Because, my friends, in the point of crossroads, crossroads in terms of national history, who do we turn to when we want to be guided? That we want to make sure that our country, our beloved Philippines, will remain strong, true, and forever in our hearts to be our best country to live in. I suggest that we find inspiration in the words of no less than our greatest national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal. Because Dr. Jose Rizal, in his struggle against the colonial regime of the Spaniards 100 years ago, advocated truly for a peace process. Never had wanted an armed struggle, for he believed we will never win if we do it. But instead, he advocated for a peace process, and that's why he established the La Liga Filipina, where all our thoughts will be processed in a way by which everyone can understand. In fact, the very words that inspire me the most, and I think has a very great impact on what we're doing this afternoon, is this. He shared with us the thought that in the battlefield of a nation's history, the greatest weapon that we can ever use will be our minds and our intelligence. And the greatest force that we can ever create will be our hearts. With this in mind, the efforts that we are doing, especially in establishing long peace, everlasting peace in our beloved Mindanao, we must have this sense of nationalism in us, a sense of strong national pride, which shall bind together us as one. And with this, with all the efforts that we are doing, if the underlying force that we are all brother Filipinos, we have this sense of nationalism in us, I think that would be a very good framework by which all of these problems in establishing peace in Mindanao can be achieved. So, what my point being is, wag nating kalimutan tayo Pilipino. In this sense, madali na natin siguro ma-achieve this lasting peace. And then we can make this comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro work. That is what we want to achieve, and that is what we want to do in the next 10 or 20 years, or even in our lifetime. This is for our children in the future. So, my friends, it has been a long afternoon. Everyone is tired. I think hindi tayo pinabreak, pero okay lang. Don't worry, I will be finishing my remarks. Makakain na tayo. But then again, in behalf of our city mayor, the Honorable Mayor Rodrigo Duterte, we wish to thank you for coming to Davao City, especially to our guests, and then to enjoy what the city has got to offer for everyone here this afternoon. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone.
So that ends our program today. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.